The situation is becoming increasingly strange. Tri-Eye Atlas vanished behind the sun at the end of October, while it was expected to be its most active phase. While NASA remained silent due to the suspiciously planned government shutdown, something else was happening. People with remote viewing abilities received assignments from anonymous sources in intelligence to mentally explore this object. What they saw turned out not to be a comet, but a mothership. Its enormous size was filled with millions of dormant beings, biological and mechanical elements interconnected in ways that defied our understanding of life or technology. Then one of the insiders made a statement that scientists at the particle accelerator opened a portal, established a two-way communication with what inhabits Tri-Eye Atlas, and received a message that everyone in the room heard telepathically at the same time. Today we will delve into the world of conspiracies, and I must warn you, each one becomes increasingly unsettling. We will begin with what distant observers saw when they peered inside Tri-Eye Atlas, and conclude with why December 25th, 2025, repeatedly appears in prophecies as the moment when timelines diverge and humanity's future splits into radically different paths. This is a special edition where we explore what happens when remote observers, whistleblowers, and prophets see the same thing from different angles. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Remote Perception of the Mothership. What happens when you ask the human mind to perceive something millions of miles away? Something that moves with impossible speed? Something that may not be what we think it is? What happens when you bypass telescopes, spectrometers, and mathematical models and instead rely on consciousness as a tool? The answers, it turns out, are both alarming and surprisingly consistent among independent observers who had no contact with each other. Remote viewing, for those unfamiliar, is a structured protocol for gathering information about distant or unseen objects using extrasensory perception. The methodology was originally developed by the CIA and Stanford Research Institute during the Cold War. It includes strict control measures, blind conditions under which the observer lacks traditional information about the target, and specific stages of data collection, starting from basic impressions and moving to increasingly complex details. The main science dismissed this as pseudoscience, yet the results obtained during military applications were statistically significant, allowing funding for programs for more than 20 years. When remote observers received assignments to search for Soviet submarines, describe foreign objects, or predict geopolitical events, they succeeded, often enough for the Pentagon to continue paying attention to it. In August 2025, a group called Adventures in Remote Perception decided to direct this controversial tool towards the study of Tri-Eye Atlas. He was designated as Target 77483-050, and 6 experienced remote viewers were gathered, each with years of training and documented successes in previous projects. The viewers were given only an alphanumeric designation, no images, descriptions, or information about what they were to perceive. Complete, informational blindness. The goal was simple. What is the nature of the object called Tri-Eye Atlas on its journey through our solar system? The results were unusual, not because they definitively proved anything. The evidence of remote viewing did not meet scientific standards, but due to coincidences. 6 independent viewers, working separately, presented descriptions that intersected in specific technical details. All described a combination of biological and artificial elements. Each of them used words like fuselage, hull, shell, metallic, porcelain-like, high-tech, but also slimy, gel-like, organic, Venus, a fusion of machine and life that does not fit our categories. All the spectators reported a 3-dimensional shape that becomes hollow, with observation windows and internal viewing chambers, complex research laboratories with a controlled environment. They described electric discharges, static electricity, buzzing, pulsation, glowing elements, shimmering surfaces radiating energy, colors that changed, edges that looked rusty or discolored, as if subjected to unimaginable time in the cosmic abyss. People mentioned that the object seemed to generate a spray in front of it, pushing particles back and forth, oddly aligning with scientific speculation that an interstellar ship could deploy precursor particles to clear its path of dangerous debris. One of the spectators, John Dixon, drew images of an object created by humans, or rather, of non-natural origin, adorned with bright green and white lights emanating from the seams between sections in a hexagonal pattern. He described how white light turns green upon contact with oxygen or during a thermal process involving metallic layers. He depicted what seemed to be various metals in different layers, possibly evaporating or sublimating, which could explain the unusual emissions detected by telescopes. Pure nickel without iron, a chemistry that shouldn't exist in nature. Patricia, another member of the audience, perceived the overflowing internal spaces, advanced technologies surpassing current human capabilities, and what she described as a non-human consciousness with complex communication abilities and a disdain for human intellect. Several spectators independently reported a feeling of being watched, sensing that the object or its occupant is aware of their distant gaze and shows little interest. Not hostile, just indifferent, like a person might regard an insect trying to comprehend a spaceship. There is data from Berdy Yavorsky, who worked on another project with the designation 495268777. Her studies focused on what she called echo impressions, faint reverberating signals hinting that the 3I Atlas is a relic zone left by a long-lost Martian civilization. She and her team perceived holographic echoes of glowing crystalline structures on the surface of the object, technologies that do not invade but return home. The term they constantly used is lighthouse, as if the 3I Atlas transmits signals meant to awaken dormant technology on Mars and possibly on Europa, Jupiter's icy moon, where underwater oceans may hide anything. This is inconveniently combined with scientific theories of panspermia, the idea that life spreads through the cosmos via natural or artificial seeds. If there was an advanced civilization on Mars, a controversial hypothesis supported by some isotopic data, and if this civilization sent probes before the catastrophe that destroyed them, then an object returning now, billions of years later, might be trying to reconnect with the remnants, not as intruders, but as distant relatives checking on an old area. But the most alarming testimony came from Sebastian Martin, a perception specialist who claims that intelligence agencies, whose names he does not specify, contacted him and asked to remotely view the 3I Atlas. What he saw was a massive mothership, kilometers in size, filled with what he described as millions of sleeping inhabitants. Not humans, but reptiloids and dragon-like beings, terms saturated with conspiracy context, used here to denote the absence of a better vocabulary. Entities in a state of suspended animation or low-energy activity, waiting. Martin insists that a strict insider working at the European Organization for Nuclear Research revealed that scientists there activated a portal, not metaphorical or theoretical, but real, using the collider to create or access a dimensional passage for two-way communication with what is inside or controls the 3I Atlas. According to rumors, holographic figures appeared in the institution, tall, reptilian, or dragon-like in appearance, communicating telepathically with every scientist in the room. Each person received the same message: "We come in peace. We are here to collect the star seeds of this planet." Star seeds, in the terms of the New Age, refer to souls or consciousness that originated from other corners of the cosmos, incarnated on Earth for specific purposes related to the evolution or awakening of humanity. Regardless of whether you take this literally, metaphorically, or completely reject it, the sequence of messages among many recipients is remarkable, and the timing, if true, coincides with the perihelion of the 3I Atlas behind the Sun at the end of October, a moment of closest approach and peak energy activity, when such a connection may require less energy to maintain. The corner of sunlight sparks special debates, as experiments in particle physics truly create conditions that have not existed in our local spacetime since the Big Bang. High-energy collisions explore the structure of reality in ways we do not fully understand. The idea of creating microscopic black holes, accessing additional dimensions, or penetrating through quantum foam into what lies beneath is not entirely marginal. These speculative extensions of accepted physics are taken seriously by some theorists, but whether this translates into the discovery of portals for communication with interstellar objects is a completely different question, requiring steps that most scientists will not take. Nevertheless, most scientists would not have predicted that remote viewers would independently describe the same combination of biological and mechanical features without prior information. A group of future forecasters, another collective of remote viewers, held sessions on an object called 3Eyes, revealing what they describe as strange correlations with apocalyptic timelines. They report seeing an object deploying swarms of smaller probes upon reaching perihelion, causing global plasma storms and disruptions resembling electromagnetic pulses as they enter Earth's atmosphere or magnetosphere. These visions place a critical window around December 25th, 2025. Just when the 3Eyes will reappear from behind the Sun and should be most visible from Earth. Forecasters describe a fork in time, a divergence point where humanity either integrates benevolent extraterrestrial technologies and advances, or enters a conflict scenario, akin to a science fiction concept where civilizations hide from each other, as contact equals destruction. Here it becomes philosophically interesting. Remote vision should not work according to our current understanding of physics. Information cannot travel faster than light. Consciousness cannot observe distant objects without physical interaction. Perception requires sensory input from photons or other particles. Yet, in controlled conditions, remote viewers found submarines, described buildings they had never seen, and provided information about events before they occurred with accuracy exceeding chance. The mechanisms remain unknown, but the phenomenon has enough documented cases that outright denial would require ignoring the body of data, which, while not meeting strict scientific standards, is statistically convincing. So what should we do with the data from remote vision on three eyes? Several possibilities arise. Firstly, it is merely a fabrication, the imagination filling in the gaps, aligning with existing science fiction tropes about aliens and ancient Martian civilizations. Viewers capture cultural narratives floating in the collective unconscious and project them onto an uncertain target. This explains similarities through shared mythology, rather than common perception. Secondly, viewers connect to something real, but interpret it through the lens of human experience and expectations. They perceive energetic signatures, structural features, intentions, but translate these perceptions into the language of familiar metaphors. What is perceived as reptilian may be a specific frequency or geometry. What seems to be a dismissive intelligence could be automated systems or artificial intelligence that does not regard biological consciousness as something important. The interpretation as a lighthouse may be correct in essence but erroneous in details. It is an ancient probe returning home, but not from Mars, and not from any civilization we can recognize. Thirdly, remote viewers may access future timelines or clouds of probabilities, quantum superpositions of what could happen, and describe the most likely or energetically charged outcome. In this model, they do not see the three-eyed atlas as it is now, but as it can become, how it can act depending on the unfolding situation. Apocalyptic scenarios, the deployment of probes, plasma storms exist as potential events that may or may not manifest depending on yet-to-happen choices and randomness. Or, fourthly, they are right. The three-eyed atlas is exactly what they describe, a biomechanical hybrid device containing dormant beings from an ancient civilization, possibly of Martian origin, possibly something even older, using technologies that cross dimensions or timelines, approaching Earth, not by chance, but with a purpose related to contact, data collection, or a catalyst for a transformation that we can barely imagine. The story of the CERN portal, as strange as it sounds, represents an attempt by certain elements within human governments or scientific institutions to establish contact or understand an object before it fully appears in our sphere of influence. The problem with evaluating remote viewing data is that it exists outside the normal verification structure. We cannot conduct controlled experiments on one-time events, such as the passage of an interstellar object through our solar system. We cannot isolate variables or demand reproducibility. We can only compare what the viewers report with what happens, and even then, interpretation remains subjective. If the three-eyed atlas releases smaller objects in December, does this confirm remote viewing, or is it a natural process of comet fragmentation? If unusual electromagnetic disturbances, plasma events, or attempts at communication are observed, do we have sensors to detect them, and a world ready to acknowledge what they might mean? What strikes me, analyzing this data with maximum objectivity, is its specificity. General statements, such as the presence of an alien ship, cannot be disproven and are useless. However, more detailed claims, like hexagonal seams emitting a specific color of light under certain conditions, multi-layered metallic compositions that evaporate, internal observation chambers, and dismissive attitudes, are details that go beyond random speculation. They can be verified, at least in principle, if we ever manage to approach the three-eyed atlas for their verification. The consistency of observations among different people who did not collaborate, worked under blind conditions, and had various training and methodologies suggests they perceive something, although this something remains open to interpretation. One of the elements highlighted by several sessions of remote observation was the feeling of camouflage. The three-eyed atlas is deliberately designed to look natural and mimic a comet or asteroid, hiding in plain sight. This is not paranoia, but strategy. If you are an advanced civilization exploring potentially hostile territory, you do not announce yourself with flashing lights and radio transmissions. You observe, learn, and remain unnoticed until you assess the situation. A probe disguised as a comet can enter the solar system, pass unnoticed, collect data, and leave without triggering defensive reactions, if any exist. The scientific observations we have so far do not contradict this. The three-eyed Atlas has a comet, shedding material, displaying comet-like features, yet lacks a tail, possesses impossible chemistry, maintains its trajectory despite mass loss, and moves along a path suspiciously coinciding with our planetary orbits. It appears comet-like for initial analysis, but strange enough upon closer inspection to raise suspicions. Exactly what one would expect from a disguise good enough to deceive a superficial glance, yet raises questions under detailed scrutiny. Then there is the phenomenon of blocking, reported by several observers. Some described their remote observation being interrupted, as if something was aware of their attention and did not wish to be noticed. Others said they managed to break through, but felt the presence of shields or barriers, layers of screening, or disorientation. One observer, John Dixon, specifically mentioned that those inside, if there were any, seemed frightened by the outcome, possibly related to their plan. Fear implies expectation, consciousness, stakes. Beings do not plan if they lack reason. They do not fear consequences if they are unaware of them. The most shocking aspect of all this is not how accurately remote observation is. It is what it implies, even if partially true. We are not talking about a simple binary comet or device. We are talking about a spectrum of possibilities where biology merges with technology, where the ancient and the advanced are not contradictory, where intelligence may not resemble anything from our experience, and where an object passing through our solar system can simultaneously be a probe, a seed, a message, and a test. All of this simultaneously performs multiple functions on timelines that surpass human history. Distant observers constantly describe the three-eyed Atlas as something ancient, using words like artifact, relic, old, worn, but also high-tech, complex, advanced, indicating a civilization that reached technological maturity millions or billions of years ago, and then either transcended, collapsed, or dispersed, leaving behind probes that continue missions started so long ago that their creators may no longer exist. We are dealing with the equivalent of a universal bottle with a message, thrown into the cosmic ocean billions of years ago, and finally washed up on our shore, while we argue about whether it is made of glass or plastic, instead of opening it and reading what is inside. The time of December 2025 repeatedly appears in remote perception sessions as a critical moment, whether observers truly foresee a future event, or the sequence of targets accidentally activated time markers, or December simply symbolizes the moment when the three-eyed Atlas becomes observable again, creating a natural focus for predictions. However, the coincidence with this time frame, regardless of astronomical calculations about visibility and perihelion, deserves attention. If something is to happen, if the three-eyed Atlas is going to do something more than just pass by, December will be the moment we find out. Until then, we have testimonies that sound like science fiction, but come from people with documented credibility in the field of perception. We are left with descriptions that awkwardly coincide with some anomalous scientific instruments and questions about consciousness, about what human perception can sense beyond the five physical senses, and whether the universe is stranger and more interconnected than our materialistic models allow. The three-eyed Atlas, viewed through the prism of remote perception, is not just an object. It is a mirror reflecting our assumptions, fears, hopes, and perhaps even our origins. Chapter 2. Connection with Mars. October 3rd, 2025. While most people on Earth hurried about their business, something unusual happened approximately 18 million miles away from us. The three-eyed Atlas approached Mars at a minimal distance, passing by the red planet at a distance that, in cosmic scales, is almost equivalent to a whisper. Closer than he will ever get to Earth. Closer than any previous confirmed interstellar visitor has approached any planet in our solar system. The timing, geometry, and precision of this encounter raise questions for which there are no comfortable answers. Why Mars? Of all the planets that the three-eyed Atlas could connect with during its journey through our solar system, Why did it fly so close to that one planet where we have the most evidence of ancient habitability, where dried river valleys and lake beds were discovered, where minerals requiring liquid water were identified, and where methane fountains still erupt from unknown sources? Is this a coincidence, or is Mars the cause of the appearance of the Three Eyes Atlas in our area? Dr. John Brandenburg, a plasma physicist who worked on the Strategic Defense Initiative and studied Martian geology for decades, proposed a theory that mainstream planetary science rejects but cannot fully disprove. He suggests that Mars did not simply lose its atmosphere due to the slow, erosive effects of solar wind over billions of years, but that it was deliberately destroyed using thermonuclear explosions. These are not collisions with asteroids or comets, but detonations. Weapons that leave specific isotopic signatures that we can still detect in the Martian soil and atmosphere. The evidence pointed out by Brandenburg includes elevated levels of certain isotopes, particularly xenon-129, which is produced during nuclear fission. The ratios do not match what one would expect from natural radioactive decay or cosmic ray bombardment. They are alarmingly close to what is observed at terrestrial nuclear test sites. He also highlighted two areas on Mars, Cydonia Mensae and Galaxias Chaos, where concentrations of these isotopes are particularly high, suggesting sites of nuclear explosions. The energy required for this surpasses everything humanity has ever produced, equivalent to millions of megatons, enough to strip the atmosphere, sterilize surfaces, and leave the planet lifeless. Before dismissing this as an extreme assumption, consider what we know. Mars once had a magnetic field that relatively suddenly ceased to exist about 4 billion years ago. Without this magnetic field, the solar wind could eventually strip away the atmosphere, but the isotopic anomalies identified by Brandenburg do not match slow erosion. They correspond to catastrophic events. Several researchers noted that the atmospheric argon ratio on Mars is anomalous compared to planet formation models, indicating that something happened that was not just a gradual loss. This leads us to a truly uncomfortable question. If there was once intelligent life on Mars, and if this civilization was advanced enough to initiate or become the target of nuclear destruction, what happened to them? Could they have escaped? Did they sow life on Earth before their end, making us their descendants? Or did they launch probes, ships, and arches into space, hoping that one day their legacy would return to a restored world? Cliff High, a data processing analyst who develops predictive models based on language patterns on the internet, proposed just such a scenario. He suggests that people are descendants of Martians, who were either refugees or remnants of a civilization that destroyed itself or was destroyed. Meanwhile, 3 points of Atlas approach to converse with the remaining lights of their own civilizations. In this context, the object becomes alien in the sense that it is foreign, a return home, a recognition, the return of an ancient ancestor to check on the descendants of the survivors. The trajectory of support for this assertion aligns remarkably. The perigee of 3 points on Atlas, its closest point to the Sun, will occur on October 29, 2025, at a distance of about 1.4 astronomical units just inside the orbit of Mars. From the perspective of Earth, this occurs behind the Sun, making the object invisible during its most active and energetic period. However, from Mars, the geometry is different. From Mars, 3 points of Atlas will be visible, a bright object crossing the Martian sky at the moment of maximum emission and activity. If you wanted to send a signal to Mars, if you wanted Mars to see you, this is exactly the trajectory you would choose. Spacecraft currently in orbit around Mars, such as the ESA's Mars Express and the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, as well as NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and rovers on the surface, all had the opportunity to observe the 3 points of Atlas during its closest approach. The photos they took, or rather, the ones that were published, show a bright, compact object without the characteristic blurred tail of a comet. NASA's Traskis orbiter created an animation showing an object moving among the stars, with analysts noting that 3 points of Atlas exhibited greater brightness changes and visible structure than the stars, indicating real changes and complexity, something more than just an icy rock spinning in space. NASA's Perseverance rover, equipped with cameras capable of night observations, captured something during this period. A blur, a trail, a faint light in the Martian night, which was later processed and enhanced by amateur astronomers. An image of low resolution, the object appears elongated, almost cylindrical, and although the aviators explained that the elongation was likely due to motion during exposure, it remains a fact that we see something in the Martian sky at the moment when 3 points of Atlas approached. Is this something that is the object itself, or one of the smaller probes that distant observers predicted could unfold? We do not know, and we may not know about this for a long time, as the data release is very slow, and the government shutdown, which we will discuss in more detail later, has caused NASA's communication offices to be inactive. The high-rise camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, the highest resolution images we have in orbit around Mars, was supposed to capture detailed shots of 3 points on Atlas. These images either do not exist, raising questions about why the observation was not successfully carried out, or they exist and have not been published, which raises other questions. The European Space Agency published a blurry image a few days after the flyby, while NASA presented nothing official, and the Chinese Tianwen orbiter and the United Arab Emirates Hope orbiter, which had clear lines of sight, also remained silent. This agreed opacity from 4 different national space agencies fuels theories of hiding facts about what was actually seen, whether the flyby past Mars revealed something that cannot be publicly acknowledged without risking panic or disrupting geopolitical stability. However, this also fully corresponds to how large bureaucratic scientific institutions operate. Data processing takes time, peer review also requires time, and no one wants to publish preliminary results that may turn out to be incorrect and undermine trust. The most mundane explanation, institutional inertia and caution, often turns out to be correct. Nevertheless, the timeframes raise suspicions. The object reaches its closest point to Mars on October 3rd, while the government shutdown in the US begins on October 1st, leading to the suspension of work for 15,000 NASA employees. The first and only image from ESA appears only on October 7th. By this time, the 3I Atlas is already passing by, the observation window is closed, and we are left with fragments of data about what should have been the greatest opportunity to capture an interstellar object in human history. Even if there is no conspiracy, the incompetence is striking. But let's look at the connection to Mars from another angle. If the 3I Atlas is a probe from an ancient Martian civilization, what could it be searching for? What could it be measuring? One possibility is biosignatures, signs of life on modern Mars, temperature variations, electromagnetic anomalies that may indicate underground habitats or active geology. Another possibility is that he checks specific landmarks, coordinates of cities or objects that existed millions of years ago and are now hidden under dust or destroyed. The description of 3I Atlas as a signal transmitter for awakening dormant technologies fits here. There may be underground structures protected from radiation and erosion, waiting for the right signal to reactivate. Jupiter's moon Europa is also in focus, as it is another place in our solar system where subsurface oceans might harbor life. If the Martian civilization reached interstellar capability, it may have created or established outposts on several worlds. The trajectory of 3I Atlas will take it past Jupiter in March 2026. Not as close as to Mars, but close enough for observation. The ESA JUICE spacecraft heading to Jupiter plans to observe 3I Atlas in November 2025. If there are coordinated observations between JUICE and NASA's Europa Clipper, which is also heading to the Jovian system, we may learn if 3I Atlas is altering its course, transmitting something, or displaying behavior indicating it is not just passing by, but exploring specific targets. Evidence of ancient Mars's habitability continues to accumulate. Recent studies of Martian meteorites found on Earth revealed organic molecules, complex carbon compounds associated with life on Earth. The rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, drilled through layers of sedimentary rock formed at the bottom of lakes and discovered chemical signatures corresponding to microbial activity. Although this does not prove that life existed, it confirms that Mars once had the conditions necessary for life: liquid water, stable temperatures, and sources of chemical energy. If microbial life existed, the transition to intelligence and technology is a completely different matter, requiring billions of years of evolution and the absence of catastrophic interruptions. Unless such a catastrophe occurred late, after the emergence of reason, after the formation of civilization, when they looked at the night sky and wondered what else might be out there. The isotopic signatures identified by Brandenburg are uneven across Mars, concentrated in certain regions, indicating localized events rather than global processes. Natural explanations for this include volcanism, meteorite impacts that have exposed subsurface materials with various isotopic ratios, or atmospheric mixing processes that we do not fully understand. However, these explanations require coincidences, a multitude of rare events creating signatures that accidentally resemble nuclear products. Occam's razor, stating that the simplest explanation is usually the correct one, works both ways. Is it easier to assume unknown natural processes, or to acknowledge that Mars might have been home to a civilization that met a violent end? And if so, who or what led to their destruction? The Brandenburg hypothesis includes the possibility that the destruction was caused by external factors, an attack from another civilization within or beyond the solar system. The consequences of this are staggering. It means we are in a grim situation where advanced civilizations eliminate potential competitors before they become a threat. This also means that the three-eyed Atlas, if connected to this ancient conflict, could be a survivor, a weapon, or a warning. It means we are surrounded by the ruins of wars we cannot comprehend. We play in a cosmic graveyard, unaware of the forces that shape the very planets we are just beginning to explore. Or does it mean that Brandenburg is mistaken? Isotopic signatures have prosaic explanations. Mars has never been inhabited by intelligent life, and the trajectory of the three-eyed Atlas past the red planet is a true coincidence, a random alignment in the infinite cosmos where every trajectory passes close to something. But even if Brandenburg is wrong about the cause, he is not wrong about the consequences. Mars has indeed catastrophically lost its atmosphere on a geological scale. Mars once had liquid water and potentially habitable conditions. Now Mars is silent, red, and deathly empty in its silence. And the three-eyed Atlas either chose or accidentally passed closer to Mars than to any other planet in our system, which requires explanations beyond puzzled shrugs and references to chance. Evidence related to gamma radiation is of particular interest. The Fermi Gamma Telescope from NASA and other instruments mapped the gamma sky, capturing emissions from supernovas, black holes, quasars, and other high-energy sources. Gamma-ray bursts corresponding to natural radioactive decay in its crust are observed on Mars. However, some researchers noted anomalies, hotspots that do not perfectly align with known geological formations. These could be measurement errors, artifacts of observation angles, or remnants of energy emissions from events millions of years ago. Gamma rays from nuclear explosions would have dissipated long ago, but the daughter isotopes formed from these explosions continue to exist, emitting characteristic signatures. If the three-eyed Atlas has recorded these signatures from interstellar space, if its sensors are advanced enough to map isotopic distributions at distances measured in light years, then it makes sense to head towards Mars. Return to the world that sent you, a world where data may remain, dormant installations, genetic material preserved in underground ice or deep regolith, shielded from cosmic radiation to extract what is possible, awaken what can be awakened, or simply witness, to record the state of the home planet and convey this information to the next destination. The close approach to Mars on October 3rd could be more than observational. If the three-eyed Atlas transmits data, and if it deployed smaller probes as some researchers suggest, then they will head towards Mars. These probes are small enough to land and penetrate underground caves through lava tubes, reaching interesting locations while remaining unnoticed by our primitive ground missions. We won't see them in orbital images. They are too small, too fast, too cautious. We can observe secondary effects, electromagnetic fluctuations, unexplained clouds of dust, changes in methane concentration, but attributing all this to an alien probe rather than natural processes on Mars requires a bold step that most scientists would not dare take. Cliff High is a surgeon who claims that humans are descendants of Martians, linking this to the panspermia theories that have gained popularity in recent years. If Martian microbes reached Earth through meteorites, and if these microbes inhabited early Earth, then Martian and terrestrial life share a common origin, like cousins separated by millions of years and planetary conditions, yet connected. If Martian life developed intelligence first, if they achieved space travel, if they understood that their world was dying and sent genetic material or even small populations to Earth, then we are not just relatives, we are descendants. The legacy of Mars lives in us, in our DNA, in the desire to explore and expand boundaries, drawing us again to the red planet as if answering the call of our ancestors. This is speculative, on the edge of what evidence allows, but not without foundation. The genetic code of earthly life, based on DNA and RNA structures, appears remarkably optimized, as if it was created rather than arising from random mutations and natural selection. Panspermia, whether a natural process or directed intervention, explains how life could have appeared on Earth relatively quickly after the planet cooled to allow for liquid water, bypassing the incredible odds of abiogenesis, the emergence of life from non-living chemistry. If Mars served as the seed for Earth, and if the 13th Atlas verifies this ancient intervention, then its trajectory and behavior become quite logical. It does not visit, but returns. The flyby of Mars became a missed opportunity of historical scale. We had 6 spacecraft in orbit around Mars, several ground objects, a known arrival time for the object, and only a blurry GIF video along with a few images processed by amateurs. We needed data, high-resolution spectroscopy during the closest approach, radio monitoring to detect possible transmissions, magnetometer readings to check for artificial electromagnetic signals, infrared imaging to locate heat sources. None of this was prioritized, or if it was not published. We learn about the 13th Atlas through its absence, through what is not said, through the gaps in the narrative that hint at either incompetence or intent. And Mars itself remains silent, offering no answers, only posing new questions. A world that could be the cradle of life, could become the birthplace of reason. Perhaps from there begins the history of humanity. And perhaps this is the final point or a stopover for an interstellar object that chose or was directed to fly a whisper's distance from its red deserts. As the 13th Atlas moves on, racing towards a meeting with Jupiter and the subsequent exit from our solar system, Mars drifts away from its trajectory, but the connection, probability, and consequences remain. We cannot forget what we have seen. We cannot reject the thoughts that the ancient civilization and the current visitor may be part of one story, a story that includes us, whether we are ready for it or not. Chapter 3. The Scenario of the Deep State. On October 1st, 2025, the United States government suspends its operations due to a deadlock in Congress over healthcare subsidies and tax policy, with 15,000 NASA employees placed on mandatory leave. The agency's website stops updating. Communication departments shut down their channels. In 2 days, the 13th Atlas makes its closest approach to Mars, providing the best opportunity to observe an interstellar object in human history. The synchronization of events becomes so distressing that it raises suspicions. Is this incompetence, a typical dysfunction of bureaucratic government, or something more calculated? A convenient excuse for delaying or suppressing information about what has actually been observed? Since July of this year, conspiracy circles have been buzzing with discussions after the three-eyed Atlas object was recorded for the first time. The theories range from plausible to paranoid, but if we set aside the most extreme claims, questions remain that have no satisfactory official answers. Why did the shutdown happen at this time? Why were the data from the Martian orbital probes delayed for several days when the European Space Agency, not subject to U.S. political games, also postponed their publication? Why Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna had to intervene with NASA Director Patrick Duffy to ensure the telescopes were actually aimed at the Tri-Eye Atlas during the flyby past Mars. And perhaps the most alarming thing is why the insurance industry, which usually models all possible risks from hurricanes to solar flares, completely ignores the space threats associated with anomalous interstellar objects. The deep state scenario, as described by various researchers and informants, suggests that the Three-Eye Atlas is used as an artificially created crisis. A false flag event intended to justify extraordinary measures. Global lockdowns, nationalization of resources, declaration of martial law, and consolidation of power under the pretext of an emergency. This scenario is not new. Historically, states have used external threats, real or imagined, to expand their powers and restrict freedoms. The question is not whether it happens, history confirms it, but whether the Three-Eye Atlas allows for such a possibility, and if elements within the government and intelligence services are preparing to use it. Let's consider the disconnection itself. The official version claims that the cause was disagreements over domestic policy, with Democrats and Republicans unable to reach a compromise on spending bills. However, the shutdown began on October 1st, just as preparations for the Mars observations were about to intensify. Technical processes for data processing were supposed to be ready, communication strategies established, scientific groups coordinating their actions between agencies and countries, But instead, chaos emerged. Data employees were disconnected from systems, unable to access observation charts or report their findings. Even routine operations like managing active spacecraft were disrupted. Then on August 28th, a few months before the shutdown, President Biden signed an order reclassifying NASA as a national intelligence and security agency. The official justification was vague, something about coordinating the assessment of cosmic threats and protecting critical infrastructure. However, the practical consequence was that NASA's data and operations were now subject to national security protocols. Information that NASA is observing, especially regarding potential threats, may be hidden from the public indefinitely under the pretext of national security. Convenient timing, isn't it? A few months before the anomalous interstellar object reaches the critical observation window, NASA suspends all public operations to ensure that everything learned remains controlled and filtered according to their agenda. On September 30th, a day before the halt, over 800 senior officers, generals, and admirals from all branches of the U.S. military were summoned to the Quantico Marine Corps base. The official reason was a scheduled briefing, but 800 senior officers do not gather for ordinary events. This guide outlines the decision makers and the people to coordinate with during crisis response planning. Some researchers link this assembly to the recent renaming of the Ministry of Defense to the Ministry of War, a name change that sounds outdated but signals a shift from defensive to offensive weaponry. What were they informed about? We do not know, but the time, a day before NASA goes silent, and 2 days before the 3 Atlas IIs reach Mars, suggests that the briefing was about this object. It may have been about intelligence assessments of its nature, perhaps military plans in case of aggressive behavior, coordination with international partners, or, most alarmingly, how to manage public perception and maintain order if the three-eyed Atlas turns out to be exactly what some fear: a ship, a probe, a harbinger of contact or conflict. Particularly notable is the silence of the insurance industry. Insurance companies hire entire armies of analysts whose task is to model risks and set policy prices accordingly. They assess hurricanes, earthquakes, pandemics, solar flares, anything that could cause massive damage. They even began to account for climate changes in long-term models. However, in the case of the three-body atlas, an object that a Harvard astronomer estimates has a 40% chance of being of technological origin, whose trajectory passes through our solar system, which, according to some models, could allow for the deployment of probes on Earth. There were no public reactions from the insurance sector. No analytical reports, no risk assessments, no adjustments to premiums due to the cosmic threat. This may mean they assessed the 3AI Atlas as a minor risk, just a cosmic object posing no danger. This may indicate that they were quietly advised through channels that leave little trace that discussing the 3AIs publicly is not in anyone's interest, creating panic, provoking market instability, economic upheavals that overshadow any physical threat posed by this object. Keep it secret, control the situation, let society believe it's just another space rock. If something happens, we will deal with it, but until then, maintain the illusion of normality. This is where theories about false flags begin to gain strength. If you wanted to stage a perceived alien invasion, not a real one, how would you do it? To achieve your goals, you will need a plausible external threat, something ambiguous that can be interpreted in various ways depending on the narrative you need. The 3I Atlas object with its anomalies and unknowns is perfect for this role. You will need control over information channels to ensure that only approved interpretations reach the public. The reclassification and suspension of NASA's work have ensured this. You need to ensure military readiness without raising public concern. The mobilization should appear as regular exercises, and the briefing in Quantico addresses this task. A mechanism will also be required to implement emergency powers, lockdowns, curfews, and movement restrictions presented as a necessary response to an unprecedented threat. Executive orders granting such powers already exist, developed after the events of September 11th, and periodically updated. The conspiracy theory called Blue Beam, which emerged in the 90s, describes such a scenario. This is a staged contact with aliens using modern holographic technologies and psychological operations to convince the world population that aliens are either invading or offering salvation, thus justifying the creation of a world government to respond to this threat. Most researchers dismissed the Blue Beam as too complex, requiring technologies and coordination beyond any state's capabilities. However, elements of the theory that use external threats for political consolidation are standard geopolitical tactics. You don't need holograms if you have a real interstellar object, truly anomalous. You just need to control how this object is interpreted and presented. David Wilcock, an investigator and informant who gained popularity for discussing insider information from alleged government sources, has warned for years about scenarios of a staged alien invasion. His sources describe several action plans related to Dyson spheres, huge artificial structures that can be imagined as hostile megastructures, and incoming objects like the Tri-Eye Atlas, which could become the MacGuffin for the operation. According to these sources, the goal is not to hide the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This secret is already leaking through many channels, but to present the first contact in a way that benefits the existing power structures. Make it a threat, not an opportunity, a crisis requiring a centralized response rather than a revelation that could decentralize power as people began to look to the cosmos instead of their governments. Some analysts also find the timing of the opening and approach of the Tri-Eye Atlas suspicious. July 2025, during a period of global political instability, economic problems, declining trust in institutions, and rising nationalism amidst a push for international governance. The object appears not in a time of unity and readiness, but during fragmentation and distraction. If you wanted to use a cosmic event for political purposes, you would need the population to feel insecure, seeking someone who could provide answers and ensure safety. The pandemic scenario of the year 2020 demonstrated how quickly the population can adapt to restrictions on movement, trade, and gatherings when faced with an invisible, poorly understood, and existential threat. The theme of 3 Atlas proposes a similar dynamic. It is unnoticed by most people without telescopes, even experts do not fully understand it, and it may pose an existential threat, according to claims by various experts. However, let's consider the opposite viewpoint. Perhaps the closure was just an unfortunate coincidence, a result of political dysfunction unrelated to the Atlas III. Maybe NASA's reclassification was driven by legitimate concerns about threats from space, ranging from anti-satellite weapons to the risk of asteroid collisions. A coincidence with the 3 A's of Atlas is merely a simple accident. Perhaps the briefing in Quantico concerned a dozen unrelated topics, while 800 generals discussed budget allocations or strategic positions on ground conflicts. Perhaps the insurance industry remains silent because their models show negligible risk, or because they simply do not track astronomical events that have no historical precedent for causing insured losses. These explanations are valid. State incompetence occurs much more frequently than state conspiracies. Agencies fail to coordinate their actions, communication breaks down, and important events slip through the bureaucracy. The closure affecting NASA's ability to respond to the 3 Atlas IIs may be exactly what it seems, a series of unfortunate but unrelated decisions. Yet a certain pattern is observed. If you look at the sequence of events, the August decree, the September military briefing, the October closure, the delay in data release, the agreed silence from several national space agencies, the lack of response from the insurance sector, you can see either an incredible chain of coincidences or coordinated efforts to control information and prepare for unforeseen circumstances that the public is not informed about. When asked if he believes that NASA and other agencies know more than they share, he answered unequivocally, no. He attributes the delays to earthly stupidity rather than extraterrestrial intelligence. In his view, the closure and subsequent information vacuum represent a human dysfunction rather than a conspiracy, yet he is somewhat optimistic. He believes that scientific institutions, however flawed, ultimately serve the truth. Others are less friendly, pointing to historical examples where governments concealed information about unidentified aerial phenomena, nuclear incidents, and intelligence assessments contradicting public statements. The question is, if they are hiding something, what exactly is it? One possibility is that images flying past Mars showed something definitive. Structures on 3 Atlas moons that are clearly artificial, smaller probes that were released, course corrections that cannot be explained by gas emissions or gravity. Publishing this information without prior preparation, without public understanding, and international coordination of response may cause panic. Markets may collapse when people begin to doubt whether economic planning matters in light of possible contact with aliens. Other institutions may collapse when doctrines clash with unforeseen realities. Social order may break down if people decide that societal rules are unimportant when we are on the brink of cosmic intervention. Either the images will show nothing unusual, confirming that the Three-Isle Atlas is just a strange comet, and the delay in data is due to the sluggishness of bureaucratic processes, not because of content too sensitive for publication. In this scenario, conspiracy theorists see patterns in randomness, perceiving chaos as coordination, while ill intentions are explained by mediocrity. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in between. Some information is indeed concealed, but not because it is evidence of aliens, rather because publishing preliminary data that could be misinterpreted is considered riskier than waiting until conclusions are definitive. It cannot be denied that society craves information, and in the absence of official transparency, alternative narratives thrive. Congresswoman Luna's direct intervention highlights this. She represents a district in Florida that houses the Kennedy Space Center, and her constituents deeply care about space exploration. When NASA went silent during the shutdown, she picked up the phone, called the director, and demanded resources to monitor the 3 Atlas satellites. Her actions led to the realignment of telescopes and the collection of data that otherwise might not have been obtained. This is an example of civic oversight in action, where an elected representative ensures that agencies serve the public interest, even when institutional inertia or opaque priorities threaten important matters. But Luna is just one voice, and her influence is limited. If someone in NASA, the military, or the intelligence community wants to suppress information about the Triad Atlas, one congresswoman cannot stop it. Protocols of classification, national security restrictions, and interagency agreements that surpass congressional oversight or provide mechanisms for keeping secrets. The public will be informed only of what is safe to know or convenient to disclose, while the rest will remain behind closed doors until a leak or a deathbed confession brings it to light decades later. Elon Musk's silence regarding the 3AI Atlas also raises questions. He owns SpaceX, manages thousands of Starlink satellites, has ambitions for Mars colonization, and regularly comments on astronomical events and space policy. Nevertheless, he said nothing publicly about the Three-Eyed Atlas, despite it being undoubtedly the most significant astronomical event of the decade. Perhaps he deemed it inconsequential, simply unworthy of his attention. Or the reason for this may be that he was advised that discussing the topic would be unhelpful, that it could cause anxiety or fuel conspiracy theories. Or, more intriguingly, he may know more than he says, having access through SpaceX contracts and work permits to non-public data, concluding that silence is more advantageous than comments. A false flag scenario, the idea that a triple atlas could be used to justify a pre-planned agenda, does not require the object itself to be a forgery. He simply demands that the reaction to the object be manipulated to use genuine bewilderment and legitimate concern for political purposes. If the triple atlas does nothing, just passes by and disappears, the measures taken, the observation, the extraordinary powers, the structures of international coordination will not disappear, but will become the norm. This is part of the control architecture that will remain long after the crisis justifying it has passed. It's a game in game theory, exploiting crises. Create or allow conditions under which a crisis seems inevitable, implement measures to resolve it, and then maintain these measures indefinitely, as the possibility of a future crisis always exists. Thus, wartime temporary measures become permanent features of governance, and emergency powers become standard practice. The Triple Atlas, whether a comet or a device, provides cover for adjustments in global governance structures, for expanding surveillance, for mobilizing military forces that may face resistance if offered without external justification. Or, and this is also worth considering, perhaps those who are preparing are doing exactly what they should, possibly assessing an anomalous interstellar object as a potential threat, classifying data until certainty is reached, mobilizing military leadership to discuss possible options, preparing emergency response plans in case the most unfavorable scenarios unfold. This is sensible crisis management. Perhaps we should be grateful that someone takes the Triple Atlas seriously, even if this seriousness manifests in secrecy and control rather than transparency and public participation. Problems that appear as competent preparation and malicious exploitation are identical until the results reveal intentions, and by then it is often too late to resist if the intentions were evil. What happens next will clarify much. When the Triple Atlas reappears behind the sun in December, when it can be observed again, when additional data arrives, we will see if the agencies and institutions currently holding back information will release it, whether explanations will be offered, and if the public will be involved or left in the dark. If transparency returns, if we receive detailed images and honest assessments of what a triple atlas is and what it means, then the delay can be explained by ordinary processes, no matter how disappointing it may be. If the silence continues, if the data remains classified and only edited summaries are published while critical details remain hidden, then questions about deep state agendas and preparations for false flags become increasingly hard to ignore. December will tell us not only about the three-dimensional atlas, but also about the world we live in. A world where governments serve the right of their citizens to information, or a world where governments protect interests that require people to remain uninformed, submissive, and controlled. Secret space programs. What if a three-dimensional atlas is not arriving from interstellar space, but returning from a mission that began decades or even centuries ago? What if the object is not foreign, but familiar, not extraterrestrial, but human, or at least connected to human history in a way that official narratives do not acknowledge? This possibility seems like science fiction until you study the constant testimonies of informants, curious gaps in the documentation of space programs, and technological anomalies that suggest our capabilities in space may extend far beyond the publicly accessible frontier. Sun Guardian. This name appears in declassified documents, in the testimonies of military personnel and intelligence officers, as well as in statements from hackers who allegedly gained access to classified networks. The plot tells that in the 18th century, after decades of secret collaboration with extraterrestrial civilizations or technology extracted from recovery programs, the United States and allied nations developed a secret space fleet. These are not satellites or space shuttles, but real naval equivalents capable of operating beyond Earth's orbit, conducting long-term missions to the outer part of the solar system and possibly to the nearest star systems. There's enough evidence that complete denial would imply a coordinated deception or mass delusion. Gary McKinnon, a British hacker who breached American military networks in the early 2000s, claims to have seen tables with data on non-commercial officers, transfers between fleets, and names of ships that did not match any known military or aircraft. He was almost extradited to face charges that could lead to decades in prison, indicating that the leaks concern truly sensitive issues. His descriptions of what he found, clean energy technologies, anti-gravity propulsion systems, evidence of structures on the Moon and Mars, match other informants' testimonies, despite not having contact with these sources. Corey Goode, another figure in this field, claims he served in a secret space program for 20 years, participating in missions related to travel to Mars, interactions with several extraterrestrial species, and operations throughout the solar system. His testimony contains details about alliances between human factions and the Nord or Pleiadian civilizations, described as humanoids, tall, fair-skinned, technologically advanced, yet philosophically aligned with principles of non-interference and gradual awakening of human consciousness. Goode's testimony is impossible to verify, tainted by connections to individuals promoting dubious spiritual teachings, but elements of his account align with other sources, which may indicate either a common mythology or similar experiences within a hidden agenda. The theory linking the 3I Atlas with the Solar Guardian or similar programs suggests that the object was launched decades ago, possibly in the 60s during the secrecy of the Cold War space race, with a mission to explore interstellar space in search of habitable worlds or to establish contact with civilizations discovered through radio astronomy. Using propulsion technologies that have not been officially recognized, such as thermonuclear engines or more exotic systems that do not require traditional fuel, the spacecraft reached such speeds that it seems to have arrived from interstellar space, although it was actually moving through the outer part of the solar system or the nearest stellar neighborhood, and is now returning. Why is the return happening right now? Perhaps the mission parameters included a planned return, or the craft detected something that requires a signal to Earth. A threat, an opportunity, information gathered during its journey that the mission commanders need to integrate into strategic planning. Perhaps something went wrong, and the craft returns damaged or exhausted, unable to complete its mission and seeking recovery, or this is part of a controlled disclosure strategy where the craft's return gradually reveals the existence of secret space programs, presenting it as a discovery rather than an admission, avoiding political repercussions from decades of lies and hidden costs. The trajectory accuracy of the Tri-Eye Atlas supports this hypothesis. Its path through the inner solar system, closely aligning with the orbits of the planets, passing near Mars and Jupiter, may reflect intentional navigational movement rather than a random cosmic trajectory. Metallic emissions, puranical without iron, may not be a natural eruption but rather exhaust from propulsion systems. Thermonuclear or fission reactions generating specific isotopic signatures that appear anomalous when analyzed through the lens of comet science. The absence of a traditional tail and the glow ahead, which appears in Hubble telescope images, may be nothing but the flame of a repulsive force, rather than solar radiation heating the ice. The connection to the Nordics or Pleiadians adds another layer. Numerous accounts of contacts and abductions over the decades describe encounters with beings matching this description, claiming to come from star systems in the Pleiades cluster, about 400 to 450 light-years from Earth. They usually present themselves as benevolent beings concerned about the development of humanity, especially regarding our nuclear weapons and environmental destruction, offering warnings and recommendations. If such a civilization truly exists and observes Earth, secretly collaborating with governments or military factions, then the Three Eyes of Atlas project could be a joint operation, a probe designed and staffed by both human and Nordic personnel, sent to gather data, and now returning to share the results. This scenario explains why governments approach the Three Eyes of Atlas project with a mix of secrecy and concern. If it is one of ours, or partially ours, acknowledging its true nature means recognizing programs that were never sanctioned by Congress. These programs were funded by black budgets and covert operations, including technologies that could revolutionize energy and transportation, but also destabilize economies based on fossil fuels and traditional aerospace industries. Economic, political, and social upheavals would be colossal, and those currently benefiting from existing power structures have strong incentives to prevent or at least control these changes. The program Red Sky is another name that appears in similar contexts and is sometimes described as an early version or parallel operation to Solar Guardian. Details are less clear, but the general assertion is that starting from the 1950s, after the Roswell incident and other alleged operations to retrieve debris, the United States began reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology, achieving breakthroughs in propulsion, materials, science, and energy generation. By the 1970s, these technologies were sufficiently advanced to carry out primitive missions beyond the moon. The Apollo program in this narrative was a limited revelation, showcasing a primitive version of our space capabilities to the public, while real research was conducted in secret using devices that did not rely on chemical rockets. The mission Apollo 20, supposedly conducted in 1976 but never officially acknowledged, allegedly landed on the far side of the moon to investigate a crashed spacecraft visible in orbital photographs. The crew reportedly discovered a large, elongated object partially buried in the lunar soil, showing signs of artificial construction. Some descriptions, such as cigar shape, segmented body, and metallic composition, match the characteristics of Three Eyes of Atlas, leading to speculation that what crashed on the moon and what is currently passing through our solar system are spacecraft of the same type, possibly belonging to the same civilizational program. Alleged footage from the Apollo 20 mission, leaked online and disputed as authentic or expertly fabricated, shows the exploration of the interior of the crashed vessel with fragments of technology and even a preserved being that appears to be in a state of suspended animation. If this is true, and we have indeed found a spacecraft on the moon, reverse engineered it, and sent our version back, then 3-1 Atlas represents the culmination of a century of development in the secret aerospace industry. This also means that contact with extraterrestrial intelligences did not begin with the arrival of the Tri-1 Atlas in 2025, but may have started decades ago with accidents, discoveries, negotiations, and collaborations that the public was never informed about. The movement for UFO disclosure, the Pentagon's acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, the creation of working groups, and official investigations may be steps towards preparing society for the revelation of programs like Solar Guardian and objects similar to Tri-1 Atlas. John Bavanko, a metaphysics researcher and show host, proposed a more complex version involving competing extraterrestrial factions and secret space programs at the center of events. According to his sources, including alleged insiders and contactees, 3-1 Atlas is controlled by reptilian extraterrestrial beings. These creatures are often described in ancient mythology and modern literature about encounters with aliens as hostile or at least acting out of their own interests, driven by survival and dominance. According to this view, these beings are allegedly involved in a conflict with the Nordics or Pleiadians and other factions for control over Earth and its population, seeing humans as a resource to be managed rather than a species to be developed. In this model, solar guardians and similar programs exist partly to protect Earth's interests in this broader conflict, acting as a kind of cosmic coast guard, monitoring movement in the solar system, intercepting unauthorized incursions, and negotiating with various extraterrestrial forces to maintain a degree of human autonomy. The arrival of 3-1 Atlas could mean either an escalation of reptilian forces, a reconnaissance mission to test Earth's defenses, or an attempt to re-establish contact with assets or agents on or beneath the Earth's surface. The October passage of Mars could be a test of Martian objects or underground structures that have existed since the time when Mars was habitable, to ensure functionality or the possibility of extracting these assets. This version is difficult to prove or disprove based on available data. It lies in the realm of unverified evidence, but offers an explanation for why several governments simultaneously seem concerned and unprepared for the 3-in-1 Atlas. If this is part of a known conflict and the expected development of an ongoing situation, then the reaction reflects a strategic position, not an opening. If this is unknown, truly unexpected, despite decades of supposed secret space operations, it suggests that either these programs do not exist or they have encountered difficulties due to something beyond their intelligence networks. Another perspective is offered by researchers studying the concept of the Galactic Federation, the idea that advanced civilizations form cooperative networks for mutual existence and cosmic governance. In this model, the three-dimensional atlas is not a probe of a single civilization, but a mobile platform used by several civilizations for docking, repairs, data exchange, and coordination. Descriptions of reptilian, avian, and crystalline entities present on the object fully align with the concept of this multinational space station. The object enters our solar system not to interact with Earth specifically, but because we are a convenient stop on routes connecting more significant destinations, a kind of cosmic equivalent of a gas station on the interstellar highway. If humanity's secret space programs have achieved interstellar capability, even if only to the nearest stars or the Oort cloud, they are likely to encounter these Federation stations. The primary contact could have taken place decades ago, leading to negotiations about Earth's status, our acceptance or exclusion from the Federation's political system, and the rules governing our development and their intervention. The current passage of the three-dimensional atlas may represent a scheduled inspection, a delegation checking how Earth is progressing, and whether we have met the criteria for technological and social development that would allow us to participate in a broader cosmic community. The analysis of emission signatures deserves closer examination. The three-dimensional atlas is losing mass. We know this from Hubble telescope observations showing material leaving the object towards the Sun, but the trajectory does not change, which requires that the lost mass is either symmetrical, evenly balanced in all directions, so that the resultant force is zero, or the object is so massive that the push from the emissions is negligible. The heavy frontal mass must exceed 33 billion tons for the mathematical calculations to work with natural emissions, but if the emissions are not the result of a natural process, but controlled propulsion, thermonuclear engines, or something even more exotic, then the thrust could be directed, providing small course adjustments that maintain the precise trajectory we observe. This will require active systems, intelligent control, exactly what one would expect from a primitive or AI-controlled spacecraft. The chemical composition matters here. Pure nickel radiation without iron is chemically strange for a comet, where mixed ratios of stellar nucleosynthesis would be expected, but for a thermonuclear reactor using specific isotopes, the byproducts will reflect the type of fuel and reaction path, potentially leading to nickel emissions. Some advanced concepts of nuclear fusion physics use nickel isotopes, and although we have not mastered these reactions on Earth, a civilization with centuries or thousands of years of development could certainly do so. The absence of iron may not be an anomaly requiring explanation, but rather a signature indicating the type of propulsion system, a mark testifying that this is technology, a controlled process. The timeline of the Solar Guardian mission, launched in the 60s or 70s, and now returning, requires speeds of about 1 to 5% of the speed of light, depending on the distance traveled. This exceeds all publicly recognized indicators, but is theoretically possible using thermonuclear impulse drive technologies, antimatter catalyzed thermonuclear synthesis, or other concepts emerging from classified research. The travel time will span decades, requiring either a suspended animation state for the crew, a multi-generational ship design, or AI control with minimal or no organic crew. The fact that 31 Atlas units show no signs of damage, do not rotate, and have no uncontrolled emissions suggests that they are either remarkably resilient or have been actively maintained throughout the journey, implying the presence of functional systems. If this is one of ours returning home, then someone on Earth knows about it. A control mission buried somewhere in a mountain or desert base is tracking it, receiving telemetry, perhaps even communicating with whoever or whatever is on board. The cessation of secrecy and the delay in publishing data are not about hiding the unknown, but about controlling the disclosure of the known, choosing the moment and manner of acknowledging that we truly were in space. Indeed, in space, for decades, technologies have existed to solve energy crises, for interstellar exploration, for transforming civilization, but they were hidden for reasons of power, profit, and control. The emotional weight of this possibility is significant. If it's true, it means that every astronaut who risked their life on chemical rockets, every scientist told that faster-than-light travel is impossible, every visionary ridiculed for suggesting we could do more than we claim, was right, and the suppression was intentional. This means that technologies capable of preventing climate catastrophe, lifting billions out of energy poverty, and exploring space exist, but are in the hands of a cabal that profits from scarcity and restrictions. This means that the miracle and inspiration generated by space exploration are artificially restrained, and the boundary is kept at a distance to maintain dependence on earthly power structures. But it can also mean that revelation is near. 31 atlases, whether part of a secret space program or not, provoke discussions about what might be hidden and what we are capable of. His anomalies cannot be fully explained by traditional comet science, creating a cognitive dissonance that opens minds to alternatives. If revelation is a process rather than an event, then 31 atlases serve as a catalyst, a significant data point that cannot be ignored, bringing us from speculation to confirmation. And if this confirmation comes, if we learn that objects like this are ours, then the question will not be what it is, but what we will do with this knowledge. The aspect of the Nordic alliance, if it is real, suggests that humanity is not alone in resisting negative extraterrestrial influence. A narrative about the conflict between reptiles and Nordics, devoid of biased terms, describes a common theme in exopolitical studies: the confrontation of factions with differing philosophies on intervention, control versus freedom, domination versus cooperation. The Nordics supposedly advocate for humanity's sovereignty and gradual awakening, offering technology and guidance without imposing control. Reptilians, or whoever they truly are, operate within hierarchical power structures where might justifies the means, and the strong dominate the weak. These are not moral assessments, but strategic orientations. Secret space programs related to the Nordics reflect the choice of which cosmos we want to inhabit and what civilization we want to become. The 3I Atlas project, passing through our solar system, may become a test of this choice. Are we aware enough to understand what we see? Are we united enough to respond consistently? Are we mature enough to handle the truth, whatever it may be? Or are we still breaking down into tribal factions, more concerned with who controls the narrative than what it actually reveals? Secret space programs, if they exist, operate in a paradigm where these questions are already resolved through action. They established contact, conducted negotiations, and defined the parties. The rest of humanity, left in ignorance, did not have such an opportunity. The 3I Atlas project now offers a chance to look up, ask difficult questions, demand transparency, and accept that the universe we thought we knew is smaller, younger, and less informed than the real universe. The concept of an interstellar intermediate station deserves deeper consideration as it resolves several paradoxes. If the 3I Atlas is enormous on a scale of kilometers, containing many species and serving as a mobile base for operations at stellar distances, then its trajectory through our solar system is not connected to Earth. We are random background elements, a primitive civilization on a remote planet that turns out to be near a useful refueling or data exchange point. Distant observers perceive crowded interiors and complex structures, seeing a living space station, a cosmic embassy where various civilizations collaborate on projects spanning galaxies and timescales that we can barely imagine. In this scenario, the Solar Guardian program or similar human programs have already established contact with these spacecraft. developed approach and communication protocols, and possibly even sent personnel for exchange. Secrecy surrounds not the existence of the 3A Atlas, but humanity's involvement in it. The fact that we are part of a broader cosmic community, while the public was told we are alone, that interstellar travel is centuries ahead, and contact remains hypothetical. Revealing this information will require explaining the reasons for secrecy, the sources of technologies, the conditions of agreements, and who made the decisions concerning all humanity, decisions made by unelected military and intelligence bodies. The return of the three-dimensional atlas is not an arrival, but a planned visit, a checkpoint in ongoing relations. The reason for heightened vigilance may be that this visit includes something new, a delegation requesting something, an assessment being conducted for a decision that will affect the trajectory of humanity as a result of negotiations unknown to the public. The closure of the government and control over information ensure that everything happening during the passage of the three-dimensional atlas remains managed and interpretable, incomplete narratives that do not threaten existing structures, even when acknowledging new realities. This is perhaps the most disturbing version of the hypothesis about a secret space program. Not that we are encountering aliens for the first time, but that we have been meeting them all along, and the guardians of this information have decided that we, all of humanity, cannot be trusted with the truth. Our reactions will be too unpredictable, our demands for change too destructive, and our awareness of deception too destabilizing for the institutions that depend on our consent and belief in their legitimacy. The three-dimensional atlas becomes a mirror that reflects not aliens, but ourselves. A view capable of incredible ingenuity and exploration, but also deep deception and control. A view that reaches for the stars while chains of secrecy keep most of us on the ground. Chapter 5. Prophetic Visions and Timelines. December 2025. This month constantly appears in visions, remote viewing sessions, in message channels, in prophetic warnings from sources ranging from intelligence analysts to spiritual mediums. Not as a vague future date, but as a specific point of transformation, the moment when something changes, when timelines diverge, when the probabilistic waves described by quantum mechanics collapse into definite outcomes. What makes December so significant? The three-dimensional atlas reappears from behind the sun, becoming visible to earthly observers, entering a window where any action, deployment, or signal will be detected. But the prophetic focus suggests more than an astronomical position. This hints at an event, a choice, a revelation that will change everything. A group forecasting the future, using trained seers to explore probable future events rather than actual or past goals, conducted extensive sessions on a three-dimensional atlas and constantly encountered apocalyptic imagery. Not metaphorical destruction, but specific scenarios related to electromagnetic disturbances, plasma events, and atmospheric phenomena that do not fit natural weather patterns. Viewers describe how smaller objects are launched in perihelion from the 3I Atlas. Dozens or hundreds of probe-sized devices that use the sun's gravity for maneuvers, accelerating towards the inner planets. These smaller probes, according to predictions, do not crash into Earth, but penetrate the magnetosphere, the protective bubble of the planet's magnetic field. Upon arriving there, they begin to interact with a plasma environment, charged particles trapped in radiation belts, leading to chain reactions that manifest as a spectacular humming enveloping the entire planet, noticeable even at the equatorial latitudes. At first, it looks beautiful and mesmerizing, but then the consequences intensify. Electronics fail not due to a direct electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear strike, but due to induced currents in long conductors, in power grids, communication networks. Everywhere there is distance. The disruption occurs selectively, affecting infrastructure while leaving biological systems untouched, indicating precision rather than a random strike. Forecasters describe the moment of choice after this event. In one branch of the timeline, humanity interprets the failure as an attack and reacts with fear, activating military protocols, attempting to shoot down or disable probes, leading to a conflict with an adversary we do not understand and cannot effectively counter. This path leads to further chaos and societal decay as systems remain offline. Resource shortages incite conflicts, and the thin veneer of civilization cracks under pressure it cannot withstand. It is a grim scenario, as contact equals catastrophe, perceived as war from the very beginning. In another branch of the timeline, a glitch is perceived as an attempt at communication or a gift rather than an attack. The selective nature of electromagnetic interference, the fact that life support systems and medical equipment can be protected while financial networks and surveillance systems cannot, suggests intentional discrimination. Someone, or something, is changing the rules of the game, eliminating toxic technological dependence and forcing a return to a more local, sustainable, and human organization. In this branch, initial panic gives way to adaptation. Communities unite, old skills are restored, and when communication is reestablished, it occurs under new terms. Less centralized, less controlled, and more aligned with human well-being than corporate profit. The path taken depends on decisions made in the coming moments, especially by those in power, to shape the narrative and direct the response. If military leaders present it as an attack, the population will perceive it that way. If scientists and diplomats interpret this as contact, other opportunities will arise. Predictions indicate that December will be the time when this decision is finalized, when 3i Atlas will do what it intends, and our reaction will determine what future we will have. These are serious topics. Probability theory, encounters with prophecy, quantum superposition applied to social and political consequences, but it all gets even stranger. Some distant viewers describe not just a vision of a fork in the road, but existing in both timelines simultaneously, experiencing the dissonance of conflicting futures overlapping each other. They report a temporary influx when the events of December resonate back, creating predictive awareness and sensitivity in those who sense the echo before the event itself occurs. This may explain why so many independent sources focus on December, despite the lack of a clear rational basis. They perceive the effect before the cause, the fork in time casting a shadow back, manifesting as prophetic certainty. The magazine Charisma, serving Pentecostal and charismatic Christian communities, published articles linking the 13th Atlas with prophecies about the end times. Biblical scenarios describe the last days of Earth before divine judgment and renewal. The parallels are so striking that even skeptics of religious interpretation acknowledge the coincidences. The revelation describes signs in the heavens, stars falling to Earth. Cosmic anxieties accompany the return of Christ or the final battle between good and evil. The 13th Atlas appears in the sky, visible to all nations, displaying behavior that cannot be explained by the laws of nature, corresponding to the archetype. The interpretation of the end times does not necessarily imply a literal apocalypse. In theological terms, the apocalypse means revelation, the unveiling of the hidden. The 13th Atlas as an apocalypse may signify the unveiling of truths that end one era and begin another. But the revelation of extraterrestrial intelligence or advanced human space programs or ancient Martian connections represents such a paradigm shift that the world after cannot resemble the world before. A prophecy becomes self-fulfilling, not through supernatural intervention, but through psychological and social transformations that occur when fundamental beliefs about our place in the universe are overturned. Some prophetic voices in Christian communities describe the 13th Atlas as a technology of divine intervention, so advanced that it seems miraculous, managed by beings performing angelic functions, even if their origin is extraterrestrial rather than supernatural. A message received through the CERN portal, according to the testimony of Sebastian Martin, states, "We come in peace to gather the star seeds," resonating with biblical imagery of the harvest, where wheat is separated from the chaff, where the faithful gather as the corrupt system collapses. Regardless of whether you interpret it literally as an event of admiration or metaphorically as an evolution of consciousness, the separation of those ready for awakening from those stuck in old paradigms aligns with prophetic frameworks that have existed for millennia. Light spheres, described by distant viewers and prophetic sources as emerging from the 13th Atlas, serve several purposes in these visions. In practical terms, they are described as means to neutralize the black budget, satellites equipped with directed energy systems, nuclear missiles, and technologies that can threaten a target or escalate conflict to unacceptable limits. But on a metaphysical level, they are seen as tools for expanding consciousness, emitting frequencies that activate dormant areas of DNA, stimulate the pineal gland, and dissolve barriers between physical and non-physical perception. Here, science and esoteric spirituality intertwine as claims become untestable, relating to subjective inner experiences that cannot be measured by external instruments. The concept of star seeds, requires detailed examination. In the literature of the New Age and contact themes, starseeds represent souls or consciousnesses that have incarnated on Earth from other planetary systems, choosing human life to assist in the evolution of Earth or to gain lessons available in physical density. They are described as those who feel out of place, longing for a home they cannot remember, and experiencing an inexplicable nostalgia for the stars and space. If the 13th Atlas structure is designed to gather starseeds, it implies the existence of a recognition system capable of determining which consciousness has a stellar origin and which is an evolutionary product of Earth, and the intention to either extract, activate, or simply acknowledge them. This seems absurd from a materialistic point of view, where consciousness is a byproduct of brain chemistry and nothing exists beyond the physical body. However, from an idealistic perspective, where consciousness is fundamental and physical reality arises from it, these concepts take on a different meaning. If consciousness can exist independently of a biological basis, then theoretically transfer between bodies, planets, and even dimensions is possible. Starseeds would be consciousness existing elsewhere, experiencing life in different forms and incarnating here with specific purposes. The 13th Atlas structure, recognizing them, would not require DNA scanning, but rather reading energy signatures, patterns of awareness that distinguish experience stories. Whether real or just labyrinthology, it doesn't change its function. These narratives provide people with frameworks for understanding and abnormal experiences, for feeling a connection to the cosmos rather than isolation on Earth, for believing that their lives have meaning beyond survival and reproduction. Prophecies about December, about the expansion of consciousness, about the gathering of starseeds, give hope that current suffering is not permanent, that changes are coming, that corrupt systems are temporarily constraining humanity and will be swept away by forces beyond their control. It is psychologically powerful, even if empirically untrue, because belief shapes behavior, and behavior shapes outcomes. Messages from the Galactic Federation, conveyed through various sources, especially via the GFL channel on YouTube, emphasize the positive perception of the 13th Atlas structure. According to these reports, the object transmits Lyran genetic codes, activation signals that enhance people carrying dormant extraterrestrial DNA or consciousness patterns. Lyrans in this cosmology are considered one of the oldest humanoid civilizations in our galaxy, ancestors of many modern star cultures, including the Pleiadians and possibly ancient Martians. If individual codes are transmitted, it signifies the restoration of connection with heritage, the return of abilities and awareness that were suppressed or forgotten during Earth's isolation when we evolved in solitude from the vast galactic community. The channel describes December as a time when these transmissions peak, creating optimal conditions for signal reception, leading to spontaneous consciousness updates, healing of physical and psychological wounds, activation of psychic abilities, and a reconnection with one's higher purpose. This can be verified, at least on an individual level, if thousands or millions of people report sudden transformations in December, if healing occurs at rates exceeding statistical norms, if abilities emerge that did not exist before. But this cannot be disproven on a collective level, as subjective experiences cannot be refuted. They can only be accepted or rejected. George Kawazalis, another researcher in this field, examines a three-dimensional map within the narrative of liberating Earth from negative extraterrestrial controlling structures. He describes modern global elites as puppets or hybrids serving extraterrestrial masters who have kept Earth as a prison planet, farm, or experimental zone for millennia. The emergence of a three-dimensional map represents an intervention from benevolent forces. White hats, in a cosmic conflict, here to dismantle controlling structures and free humanity for self-governance. Plasma events and electromagnetic disruptions target the control technological infrastructure, satellites watching over us, financial networks binding us to debt slavery, communication systems fueling propaganda and discord. This narrative helps people see themselves as part of liberation, rather than victims of circumstances beyond their control. He also provides clear enemies: the Cabal, the Deep State, negative extraterrestrial beings, and clear allies: the Galactic Federation, Nordic races, the very three-dimensional map. The moral clarity of this approach draws attention after decades of convoluted geopolitics, where everyone claims to be good while accusing others of evil, but moral clarity often oversimplifies creating binary categories where reality operates on spectrums, and dangerous prophetic narratives can justify actions while waiting for external saviors instead of creating solutions independently. The concept of the fractalization of timelines deserves serious philosophical attention, even if the mechanics remain speculative. Quantum mechanics describes superposition, where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses them into a single outcome. Applying this to the macroscopic world, one can assume that future events exist like clouds of probabilities, where multiple versions unfold until decisions fold probability into reality. Private observers with access to these clouds of probabilities perceive various future scenarios as equally real, because in a quantum sense, they are so until the moment of wave function collapse. If this is true, then the accuracy of prophecy does not require a vision of a predetermined future, but implies the perception of highly probable trajectories and their feedback through time to influence the choices that determine which trajectory is realized. The prophecy becomes a self-defeating paradox. It is accurate because it warns of what will happen if nothing changes, but it becomes inaccurate if the warning prompts changes that prevent the predicted outcome. December serves as a point of convergence in this model, as it is when the three-eyed atlas is most noticeable and active, compelling reality to choose which version of events will become history. The year 2027, mentioned by the group Forecasting the Future and others, expands this concept as a secondary convergence. If December 2025 is the starting point for decision-making in the context scenario, then 2027 represents the crystallization of the consequences, with a world emerging from the December elections becoming undeniable. Observers describe the year 2027 as radically different depending on which branch of the timeline was chosen, either a post-collective cooperative society or resource-intensive wars in the style of Mad Max. The gap between December 2025 and the end of 2027 allows time for initial decisions to spread through systems, causing dominoes to fall as feedback loops amplify small differences into huge discrepancies. What should we do with all this prophetic material? Reject it as daydreaming, imagination filling the unknown with archetypes and hopes. Perhaps, but this does not explain the convergence among sources without clear communication. The specificity of the December timeline, correlating with astronomical events unknown when some prophecies were recorded, to perceive this literally as a prediction of physical events. Literal interpretation encourages passivity, waiting for external intervention rather than taking responsibility for shaping outcomes. Perhaps the golden mean lies in recognizing these prophecies as a mapping of possibilities rather than predictions of certainty, as descriptions of what may happen depending on collective choices, as providing a vision of potential future events that can inspire or warn. This is not a script to follow, but scenarios for consideration, data points in risk assessment, and cultivating hope. December will come, whether we believe in prophecies or not, whether we prepare or ignore, whether we perceive three-eyed atlases as a threat, a gift, or insignificance. What we choose to do with our perceptions determines which of the prophecies, if any, will come true. This happens not because the prophecy predicts the outcome, but because our reaction to it shapes the choice that leads to the result. Imagine a galaxy as a forest at night, vast, ancient, full of life, yet shrouded in darkness. Each civilization is both hunter and prey, aware that revealing its location may attract hostile attention. The optimal strategy in such an environment is silence, camouflage, and cautious movement in the dark without sounds or light that could attract predators. This is the dark forest theory, an elegant and frightening solution to the Fermi paradox proposed by Shaken. The paradox is that we have not found clear signs of extraterrestrial intelligence, despite the universe being old and vast enough for intelligent beings to occur frequently. The numbers here are simple. Our galaxy contains about 200 billion stars, many of which have planets, and some are inhabitable zones. Unprotected investments in the probability of aerogenesis suggest millions of potentially habitable worlds. Life on Earth has developed complexity and intelligence over billions of years, but the universe has existed for nearly 14 billion years, and our galaxy formed more than 12 billion years ago. Civilizations that emerged just a million years ago, a moment in cosmic time, could possess technological capabilities that are hard for us to imagine. They should be visible, their engineering projects detectable, their signals filling space. And yet, we see only silence. a great silence. The dark forest theory explains this through game theory. If you do not know whether another civilization is friendly or hostile, and if advanced civilizations have the technological means to easily destroy primitive ones, then any interaction poses an existential risk. You cannot assess intentions from a distance, cannot negotiate from a position of weakness, cannot defend yourself if you are outnumbered, so the safest strategy is to remain hidden, eliminating any discovered civilization before it detects you and potentially destroys you. The galaxy is not empty. Those who survive long enough have simply learned to hide. The appearance of a three-dimensional atlas becomes horrifying here. If this is an artificial object, if it is a probe from an advanced civilization, its arrival disrupts our camouflage, we become visible and known, and we have no idea what that means. Is the three-dimensional atlas a scout for the capture fleet, assessing our defensive capabilities and resources? Or is it a probe of first contact from a civilization that greets us peacefully? Or is it an automated system executing a program designed so long ago that its creators no longer exist, following mission parameters that may not account for current realities? If you know that he clearly outlined this risk, he developed what he calls the Loeb scale, ranking interstellar objects from 0, clearly natural, to 10, clearly technological, and inevitably threatening. The current assessment of the Object 3AI Atlas is 4, indicating a roughly 40% chance of its unnatural origin. This is a serious enough indicator to take precautions, but not high enough to cause panic. However, this rating can change very quickly with the emergence of new data. If 3AI atlases release smaller objects in December, change course, start transmitting signals, or exhibit behavior that cannot be explained by natural causes, the rating will rise. When rated 8 or 9, we speak of a confirmed artificial object with unknown but potentially hostile intentions. At a rating of 10, invasion begins, and defensive measures become vital. The problem is that we have no serious defenses. Our most modern weapons, nuclear missiles, have a range of thousands of kilometers and speed measured in kilometers per second. The 3I Atlas move at 58 kilometers per second and will completely leave our solar system within a few months. We cannot intercept it, cannot land on it, cannot disable it, cannot even effectively communicate with it, because we do not know its language, its protocols, its intentions. We are like ants watching an elephant passing through our colony, hoping it doesn't step on us, because we have no power to influence its path. NASA proposed using nuclear weapons to deflect incoming threats in the context of asteroid protection. The DARK mission successfully demonstrated the kinetic impact method by colliding with an asteroid to change its trajectory. But these strategies assume that natural objects follow predictable physical laws. If 3 Atlas drones are under intellectual control, if they can maneuver, if they have defense mechanisms, attempting to use nuclear weapons could be suicidal. Blowing up weapons next to a scout of a civilization capable of interstellar travel, at best, they will ignore our primitive aggression. In the worst case, they will perceive this as a declaration of war and respond proportionally, which from their perspective could mean the sterilization of the threat, us, to prevent future confrontation. The dark forest scenario is not paranoia, but a risk assessment. We have been broadcasting radio signals and television transmissions into space for over 80 years, electromagnetic waves announcing our presence to anyone listening within 80 light years. Thousands of stars are in this area, some of which have confirmed planetary systems. If there is intelligent life in any of these systems, they know we are here. They observe our development, recording spectroscopic signatures of industrial civilization, changes in the atmosphere indicating technological activity. We had decades to prepare, to send scouts, probes, or fleets moving at speeds we cannot match, arriving just when we are vulnerable, advanced enough to be interesting, but not enough to defend ourselves. The arrival of 3 Atlas ships now, in this narrow time frame, is either a cosmic coincidence or a cosmic intention. We are at a turning point as a species capable of space travel, yet barely able to wield nuclear weapons, lacking planetary defense, globally connected through technology but politically fragmented and tribal. We are on the brink of becoming victims of benevolent mentors or efficient predators. We will not understand what is happening until it is too late to change the outcome. The United Nations has no protocol for such a situation. In 2005, Congress tasked NASA with identifying 90% of space objects larger than 140 meters that could collide with Earth. as such a collision could cause regional destruction. Object 3 is an atlas at least 40 times larger, potentially with a diameter of over 5,000 meters. It is not on a collision course, but the tracking and warning system must be applied to it as well. Nevertheless, there was neither a UN Security Council meeting, nor an emergency session, nor global coordination of the response strategy. Either the threat is assessed as minor, or retaliatory measures are taken through closed channels, where the public cannot observe or influence decisions made on our behalf. Avila presented a report to the UN with an urgent request for the establishment of an international committee focused on threats from interstellar objects, arguing that we need frameworks for assessment and response before a crisis forces us to act on improvisation. His proposal includes monitoring systems for the entire sky and observatories in both hemispheres capable of detecting and tracking objects as they approach, providing maximum warning time. He advocates for a drastic increase in funding, arguing that after the first confirmed encounter with alien technology, budgets will need to increase 1,000-fold to match global military spending, as the consequences for the world economy and security will be extremely serious. Opposition to Loeb's proposals comes from various sides. Scientists argue that he is sowing panic by claiming that the three-body problem is almost certainly a comet, distracting resources from alien defense scenarios and taking away funds needed to address real issues like climate change and pandemic preparedness. Politicians consider proposals for the creation of large new international organizations and monitoring systems unfeasible, as they require cooperation that does not exist and funding that will not be allocated unless the threat becomes imminent and obvious. In the field of security, military and intelligence services prefer to keep such capabilities secret, if they even exist, so that potential adversaries do not know what we can or cannot detect. But Loeb's argument remains valid, regardless of whether the three-eyed atlas is a specific threat. The universe is vast and ancient. The probability of other intelligent life existing is high, and our detection capabilities are rapidly improving. The Vera Rubin Observatory, which will begin operations in the coming years, will repeatedly photograph the entire visible sky, discovering millions of objects each year, including potentially dozens of additional interstellar visitors. We are transitioning from an era when interstellar objects were rare surprises to an era where their regular appearances require assessment. Is it a stone, or a ship, a scout, or a weapon, natural or artificial? We need systems to answer these questions before one of them becomes a weapon, and we find out too late. The silence of the insurance industry regarding space risks raises particular concern when viewed through the lens of the dark forest concept. Insurance is designed to assess and distribute risks, preparing for low-probability, high-consequence events. Asteroid impacts, supervolcano eruptions, solar storms, all these risks are modeled and accounted for in various policies and investment strategies. However, the first encounter with an extraterrestrial intelligence that could potentially be hostile represents the highest black swan event, completely beyond the models. The fact that insurance company leaders do not discuss Three-Eye Atlas indicates that they either assess the risk as zero or consider it uninsurable, meaning the consequences would be so catastrophic that no precautions or capital reserves would help. If 3 and Atlas represents an attack or a harbinger of an assault, our defensive capabilities are limited to protection against specific threats that we can predict. If the threat is kinetic, objects moving at relativistic speeds and striking cities or infrastructure, then there is no defense except for detection and evacuation, and even that requires warning time that we may not have. If the threat is biological, it could be pathogens created to reduce the human population before colonization. In that case, biosafety and rapid vaccine development become critically important. But protection against unknown biology created by a significantly more advanced intelligence is likely useless. If the threat is mimetic, that is, an information war or psychological operations using our cognitive distortions and social divisions, then we are already vulnerable, already compromised by our own technologies that track and manipulate our behavior for profit, making us easy targets for those who understand these systems better than we do. The only defense that can work is to not present an interest for attack, maintaining such a low profile and limited capabilities that we remain out of sight, not being interesting or threatening enough to justify the energy costs of our elimination. However, we have already failed this strategy by declaring our existence and developing nuclear weapons. We are noisy and dangerous, at least to ourselves, which makes us exactly the emerging threat that the dark forest concept suggests should be suppressed before it strengthens. The three-eyed atlas, if it truly follows such logic, represents a trial of whether we will be allowed to continue existing. Or perhaps the dark forest theory is mistaken. Maybe the galaxy is not hostile. Perhaps advanced civilizations evolve beyond resource scarcity and territorial competition, acting from abundance rather than lack, viewing emerging intelligence as an opportunity rather than a threat. The zoo hypothesis suggests that Earth is a protected reserve, intentionally left undisturbed by civilizations monitoring our development, waiting for us to mature before making contact. In Star Trek, the Prime Directive establishes an ethical rule prohibiting interference in the lives of civilizations that have not achieved faster-than-light travel. A three-eyed atlas could be part of a monitoring system, observing the preservation of natural development without external influence. The opposing viewpoint to the zoo hypothesis is that it requires the consent of all civilizations capable of contacting us, and reaching such consent seems unlikely, especially when even among humans there is no unity on fundamental ethical issues. One rebellious group, one empire operating on different principles, and the zoo fence collapses. Unless the observing civilization is advanced and powerful enough to protect the reserve from all threats, it creates new problems. A benevolent dictatorship remains a dictatorship, and we have no right to agree or refuse to be exhibits in a zoo. There is also a possibility that contact occurred many years ago, and what we are observing now is not the first contact, but a restoration of communication after a period of isolation. The ancient astronaut hypothesis suggests that human civilization was influenced, or possibly even created, by the intervention of extraterrestrial beings, supported by anomalies in archaeology and mythology. Structures like the Egyptian pyramids, Mayan temples, and Moai statues on Easter Island demonstrate engineering and organizational skills that seem too advanced for the stated time periods. In many cultures of the world, celestial beings, star creatures, heavenly vehicles, and knowledge passed down by those who came from the heavens are described. If these meetings were real and not a figment of imagination, then the three-eyed atlas could be the very ancestors returning to check on how their experiment or intervention is progressing. This changes the perception of risk. We are not encountering an unknown alien intelligence, but restoring a connection with a familiar intelligence that has a history of interaction with us, expectations, and possibly claims on us. The calculation of the dark forest changes if we are not victims wandering through the wilderness, but livestock in a managed pasture, domestic animals whose free grazing time is running out. This is not necessarily worse, just a different kind of threat, the loss of autonomy instead of the loss of life, although in practice this distinction may prove insignificant. The pressure of deadlines is real. The three-eyed atlas will become visible in December, will be closest to Earth in early 2026, and then will head towards Jupiter, leaving the solar system by the end of 2026. We have about 14 months to gather data, draw conclusions, and implement measures if necessary. This is not much time for sluggish institutions, for international cooperation that is currently fragmented, and for technologies that need to be developed from scratch. If we need protection, communication, or evacuation of the population, 14 months will be enough only for sorting and prayer. The use of a low stake suggests that the costs of the error associated with underestimating the three-eyed atlases as a natural phenomenon, when in fact it is technological and potentially hostile, significantly exceed the costs of preparing for a threat that ultimately turns out to be a false alarm. It is better to overestimate and spend resources than to underestimate and face the threat of extinction. The precautionary principle applies to cosmic risks, but governments and institutions operate under different risk assessment criteria, where visible actions that turn out to be unnecessary cause greater harm to careers and reputations than invisible inactions that could lead to disasters beyond their control. No one is responsible for preventing the inevitable, but everyone blames false alarms. This is the dilemma of the dark forest, to act as if every shadow hides a predator and live in constant fear, wasting resources on protection that may never be needed, or to behave as if predators do not exist and find oneself unprepared when one appears. The optimal strategy requires an accurate assessment of the threat, but such an assessment requires information that we do not have. The three-eyed atlas did not attack, did not communicate, and did not reveal its intentions, simply moving through our space, following a trajectory that could be natural or carefully calculated. We remain in conjecture, projecting our fears and hopes onto uncertain data, trying to determine whether silence means safety or if we stand in an open meadow while the sights are already aimed. And when we hear the shot, it will be too late to run. The appearance and revelation. November approaches as I write this, and with it, the three-eyed atlas emerges from behind the sun. For more than a month, the object remained invisible from Earth, hidden from sunlight during its peak activity, passing perihelion on October 29th, when heating from solar radiation was expected to cause an intense gas outburst, if it were a typical comet. We have no direct observations from this critical window, only sparse data from the flyby past Mars in early October, and any classified observations that may exist from solar monitoring satellites that do not share their findings publicly. What we know is that the three-eyed atlas survived the perihelion. Objects approaching the sun sometimes disintegrate under thermal stress, shattering into pieces as ice sublimates faster than structural integrity can withstand. The Comet Ike disintegrated during its perihelion passage in 2013, transforming from a bright object visible to the naked eye into a scattered cloud of debris. It seems that the three-eyed atlas remains intact, coordinated, and continues to move along its calculated trajectory towards the outer part of the solar system. This indicates something, although interpreting it requires more data than we have. The ESA spacecraft JUICE, exploring the icy moons of Jupiter, will observe a three-eyed atlas in November as it moves towards its target in the Jovian system. JUICE is a spacecraft equipped with modern instruments such as cameras, spectrometers, and particle detectors that can provide unprecedented information about the composition, structure, and emissions of objects. The European Space Agency confirmed that JUICE will attempt observations in November, possibly coordinating its actions with NASA's Europa Clipper mission, which is also heading to Jupiter. Two ultraviolet spectrographs on both spacecraft will simultaneously observe the three-eyed atlas from different angles, providing stereoscopic data that will reveal its three-dimensional structure and rotation characteristics. However, there is one but. JUICE is close to the sun on its orbit, using its high-gain main antenna as a heat shield to protect sensitive instruments. He communicates with Earth through a small mid-power antenna at significantly reduced data transmission speeds, and since JUICE is on the opposite side of the sun from Earth, the distance for data transmission is at its maximum, limiting communication capabilities. The European Space Agency clearly stated that it does not expect to receive data from the three-eyed atlas observations until February 2026, 3 months after the observations themselves. By that time, the three-eyed atlas will continue its journey beyond Earth's orbit, approaching Jupiter, and everything that happens in December will already be history. This delay is disappointing, but it is inevitable considering orbital mechanics and telecommunications limitations. This also means that if something significant happens in December, if the three-eyed atlas releases smaller objects as remote observers predicted, if it transmits signals or changes course, or exhibits behavior requiring immediate response, we will act without the best observational data. We will have ground-based telescopic observations, which are valuable but limited by atmospheric distortions and relatively low brightness of objects. We will receive data from the Hubble and Webb space telescopes if these resources are directed at the three-eyed atlas. But planning such observations requires prior organization and consideration of the competing priorities of other astronomical programs. Amateur astronomers filled the gaps in professional observation and will be key in December. A global network of amateur telescopes, coordinated through online platforms and driven by genuine curiosity rather than institutional constraints, will provide nearly continuous monitoring when the three-eyed atlas becomes visible again. They have already captured images during the approach of the object, revealing details missed by professional astronomers, and their contribution will only grow as professional resources remain focused on other goals or face bureaucratic delays. A hobbyist known as Dobsonian Power captured an image during a flyby of Mars, which sparked active debates online. An image enhanced by layering multiple exposures to increase the signal-to-noise ratio revealed angular structures in the coma of a three-eyed atlas, dark elements that did not match the blurred distributions expected from simple dust and gas. These structures appeared geometric, almost artificial, sparking intense speculation about the internal equipment or installations on the surface, visible through the surrounding material. Some specialists claim that these features are artifacts of image processing, pareidolia, when human perception recognizes faces and structures in random noise. However, The debate highlights how desperately we need clear data and how much interpretation is required when it comes to ambiguous images of objects millions of miles away. Periodic changes in brightness and position of the three-eyed atlas, recorded in August and September, added another layer of complexity. Preliminary analysis published in an astronomical telegram suggested a possible 4-hour period of deviations in position with a corresponding 2-hour period in brightness changes. This could indicate the rotation of a poorly formed object, with different faces reflecting varying amounts of sunlight as it spins through space. But it could also suggest active processes, emissions from specific locations, pulsing engines, and internal dynamics manifesting as external changes. An animated sequence of an orbital spacecraft captured during its flyby of Mars showed that the three-eyed atlas exhibits more diversity than the stars in the background, suggesting real changes rather than observational artifacts. These changes may be related to gas emissions that appear and disappear as certain areas heat up in sunlight and then move into shadow, or it could be something else. Unfolding probes entering and exiting the field of vision, moving structural elements, activity not related to object augmentation, but connected to the mind controlling the operations. We must be careful not to misinterpret ambiguous data by fitting it into preferred narratives. Human psychology is geared towards seeing patterns and attributing meaning to them, perceiving intent behind events that may be entirely mechanical or random. This is how religions are formed, conspiracy theories spread, and we make sense of the complex world by creating stories that give events meaning beyond mere facts. The three-eyed atlas can do nothing but exist, move according to the laws of physics, lose mass due to natural processes, rotate from ancient collisions or gravitational interactions, and all the anomalies we discussed may have mundane explanations that we simply have not yet discovered. But acknowledging this possibility does not mean we should reject anomalies. Science advances by taking observations seriously and not settling for superficial excuses that do not actually explain the data. The atlas with three eyes has no tail, although it should. Its chemical composition does not match what we know about comets. Its trajectory suspiciously coincides with the orbits of planets, and its mass exceeds what would be permissible given the observed brightness. These are facts that require explanation, and if there are natural explanations, let's find them through thorough analysis rather than making assumptions and moving on. Avilov tirelessly advocates for this approach. The atlas with three eyes should be considered potentially anomalous until proven otherwise, directing resources towards observation and analysis to gather as much data as possible while the opportunity exists. He is criticized for his desire for attention, for promoting hypotheses about extraterrestrial origins to maintain his media profile. Perhaps there is some truth to this. Incentives shape all kinds of behavior, including scientific. But Loeb also risked his reputation and time by leading the Galileo project, which develops monitoring systems capable of tracking millions of objects per year, analyzing them for technological signs, seriously considering the possibility that we may not be alone, that evidence of others may already be in our data if we just use the right tools and open minds. The Galileo project is a practical implementation of astroarchaeology, searching for artifacts rather than radio signals. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, or SETI, has focused for decades on electromagnetic transmitters, assuming that advanced civilizations intentionally broadcast their presence, or that their ordinary communications leak into space as detectable technological signatures. However, Loeb asserts that artifacts, physical objects in space, may be more numerous and enduring than signals. An experiment launched millions of years ago continues to function, or at least exists, long after the civilizations that created it may have disappeared or evolved to a higher level. Finding such an artifact means confirming the existence of intelligence somewhere else, even if that intelligence is now extinct or inaccessible. Each atlas with three eyes could be the first artifact, the first confirmed discovery of technology beyond Earth, or it could be the second, third, or 10th. Depending on whether Oumuamua and other candidates are ultimately recognized as artificial. Resistance to accepting any interstellar object as artificial is partly due to legitimate scientific conservatism. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, but also due to psychological discomfort with the consequences. If the atlas with three eyes is explored, it means someone sent it. Someone knows we are here. Someone capable of interstellar travel has included us in their maps. This changes everything about how we understand our place in the cosmos, our isolation, our uniqueness, our future possibilities and risks. The December observation window is critical not only for data collection but also for testing predictions. Reviewers note that important events occur in December when probes are launched, plasma events happen, and final decisions are made. Prophetic sources assert that December will be a turning point in our reality, when humanity's path will diverge based on our reaction to revelations. If December passes and the object 3 Eyes of Atlas shows nothing unusual, just continuing to move like a bright comet, then the predictions will be false, the prophecies incorrect, and we can consider this case an interesting anomaly, but ultimately natural. If December brings something unexpected, like signals, maneuvers, or electromagnetic disturbances, then every prediction will gain credibility, and every doubt will seem premature. I find myself in a strange intellectual position, balancing between conflicting impulses. The scientist in me strives to rely on natural explanations and not resort to theories about aliens, ancient programs, or consciousness-expanding technologies until all traditional possibilities are exhausted. The skeptic in me understands how easily a person can create complex mythologies based on limited data, how strongly we want to believe in our uniqueness, in being chosen, and soon undergoing a transformation that will justify our current sufferings. But the honest observer in me cannot ignore the pattern, the convergence of anomalies that individually confirm nothing, but collectively hint at something truly unusual happening. What could be considered evidence? What observations could change the status of the 3-eyed atlas from possible artificial to likely, and then to definitely artificial? Loeb proposed criteria: electromagnetic transmissions from an object with frequencies and patterns that cannot be explained by natural sources, course corrections that cannot be explained by gas emissions, active navigation maintaining trajectory, deployment of smaller objects that themselves demonstrate non-gravitational acceleration, structures visible at sufficient resolution where geometry clearly indicates design rather than natural formation. Any of these circumstances would significantly change the odds, but we currently have none of them, although December may offer them if we observe carefully. The synthesis of everything we have investigated during this inquiry leads to several conclusions, some of which bring comfort, while others provoke deep concern. Firstly, the 3-eyed atlas is indeed anomalous, displaying characteristics that poorly fit our understanding of interstellar comets. This does not prove artificiality, but requires serious consideration of this possibility alongside natural explanations. Secondly, several independent sources, from scientific observations to sessions of remote viewing and prophetic warnings, converge on similar timelines and scenarios. This convergence may reflect common cultural expectations and data contamination between sources, or indicate that different people perceive the same basic pattern in different ways. Thirdly, the institutional responses to the 3 eyes of the atlas were insufficient. Delays in data publication, poor coordination between agencies, and a lack of seriousness regarding the object, considering its anomalies and risks if it is not natural. This could be ordinary bureaucratic inefficiency or indicate coordination at levels inaccessible to the public, preparing for scenarios that are not disclosed to us. Fourth, as a civilization, we are not prepared for the scenario of first contact, whether it is hostile, neutral, or friendly. We lack protocols, unified response capabilities, and frameworks to understand what contact is when the contacted can be biological, artificial, or trans-dimensional forms of existence, for which we have no categories. The fifth point, the conversation itself matters. Millions of people follow the atlas with 3 eyes, discussing its implications, questioning official narratives, and demanding transparency. This represents an evolution in how we interact with space. We do not passively accept everything the authorities say about space. We actively participate in discovery, using distributed intelligence and open research to fill the gaps left by institutions. This is new. This is powerful, and it is a trend that continues regardless of what the 3-eyed atlas turns out to be. December will clarify much, but not everything. Even if the 3-eyed atlas does something definitive and manifests as a technological object, the questions will only multiply, not resolve. Who sent it? Why? What do they want? How should we react? Do we have a say in what happens next? Or are we just passengers on this journey? Because in a process we did not choose and cannot control, the emergence from the sun is literal. 3 eyes of the atlas become visible again, but it is also metaphorical. Truth arises from darkness. Reality reveals itself, whether we are ready for it or not. I hope for what I think many hope for. revelation without catastrophe, contact without conquest, transformation without trauma. Optimistic scenarios where a three-eyed atlas is a messenger of a civilization wishing us well, where technologies are shared to solve our energy and ecological crises, where we are welcomed into the galactic community and given advice on overcoming the challenges we face. These scenarios are possible. Nothing in the data excludes them, but pessimistic scenarios are also possible. And the tragedy will be that we learn too late that we could have prepared, could have united, could have imagined ourselves worthy of preservation or partnership, but did not do so because we were too divided, too distracted, too attached to the denial of the possibilities that made us uncomfortable. The three-eyed atlas is a mirror, just like a riddle. What we see in it reflects what we bring to the observation. Those who expect a threat see a predator, those who await salvation see a savior, and those who expect nothing contemplate a comet. We all look at the same data, the same object, the same trajectory in our solar system, but different interpretations reveal more about us than about the object itself. We are a species capable of reaching for the stars, yet when faced with the unknown, we still reach for weapons. We are a species capable of incredible cooperation, but fracturing into tribes under pressure. We stand on the brink of either becoming a space civilization or self-destruction due to our inability to overcome our roots. The three-eyed atlas does not determine which path we choose. We do. The object is a catalyst, an event, a data point, but the choice is ours. How we react to uncertainty, how we relate to evidence that challenges our assumptions, how we balance between caution and paranoia, openness and skepticism, hope and realism. This is a test of our readiness, not only for the three-eyed atlas, but also for a future that includes space, not just one planet. Sooner or later, we will face this challenge, whether now or later, whether with this object or another. The universe is too vast, too old, and full of possibilities for Earth to remain forever isolated. The three-eyed atlas is just a prologue, the first clear note in the symphony that surrounds us, but we are only beginning to hear it. With the approach of December, and as telescopes direct their gaze to the section of the sky where the three-eyed atlas will reappear, I remember that the etymology of the word revelation comes from the Latin revelare, meaning to unveil, to open a curtain when something hidden becomes visible. This is not the creation of a new truth, but the revelation of a truth that has always existed, but was overshadowed. Whether the three-eyed atlas is a stone or a ship, natural or artificial, a scout or an artifact, it removes the veils, forcing us to confront uncomfortable questions, leaving theoretical reflections. Are we alone? Are we safe? Are we ready? The answers, whatever they may be, will depend not on the object, but on how we change in the process of obtaining them, and perhaps that is the essence. Perhaps the universe doesn't care whether we call the three-eyed atlas a comet or a device, as long as we ask questions and allow those questions to transform us into something capable of handling any answers. Chapter 8. Surprise or Connection. If you just joined, don't forget to like and subscribe. Then leave a comment telling us where you are listening from, what time it is, and whether you think we are alone in the universe, or if something has been watching us all this time. If you want to help our community grow, share this on social media or your favorite messenger. Thank you for supporting us. August 15th, 1977. A date that will haunt astronomers for almost half a century. The Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University detected something that shouldn't exist. A narrowband radio signal at a frequency of 1421.426 megahertz. On the hydrogen line, a frequency that many scientists consider a universal channel for interstellar communication. Jerry Emmon, reviewing the printout of data days later, noticed a sharp spike in intensity and wrote one word in red pen: "Wow." This note signaled its title and sparked decades of speculation, ultimately leading to disappointment. The signal lasted exactly 72 seconds, the full-time interval during which the Big E could observe it, and then it disappeared, never to repeat, evading numerous subsequent scans. Its source was identified in the constellation Sagittarius, an area filled with stars located near the center of our galaxy. For many years, this remained one of the most intriguing anomalies, a mystery of the cosmos shrouded in radio waves and statistical improbability. Some dismissed it as natural astrophysical noise, others as hydrogen clouds of comets, although this theory was completely disproven. The signal had all the signs of intelligent origin: a narrow band, high intensity, perfect frequency, but without repetitions, without confirmation. It remained forever in the realm of possibly. We move to July 1st, 2025. The Atlas telescope in Chile captures something moving through our solar system at impossible speed, something from beyond, from interstellar space. This is the third such visitor we have ever confirmed, and it has been named Three Eyes Atlas. When the trajectory analysis begins, something unusual is revealed. This object, a comet or a spacecraft or something else, retraces its path through space back to the same galactic neighborhood, Sagittarius, the same constellation, the same general direction. Evolov, an astrophysicist from Harvard who became a sort of lightning rod in the scientific community for his willingness to consider technological explanations for anomalous objects, begins his calculations. On August 12, 1977, 3 days before the discovery of the WOW signal, Atlas's three eyes were approximately 600 astronomical units away from us, which is about 600 times the distance between the Earth and the Sun, translating to a light travel time of about 3 days. The celestial coordinates of the object at that moment: right ascension 19 hours 40 minutes, declination minus 19 degrees. Compare this with the origin point of the WOW signal, a distance of about 4 degrees in right ascension and 8 degrees in declination. Consider this for a moment: 4 to 8 degrees of separation across the celestial sphere. The forehead calculated the probability that two random directions in the sky would align at such a level, roughly 0.6%, less than 1 chance in 150, not impossible, but extremely unlikely. Statistically significant enough to warrant serious attention rather than a frivolous diversion. But here's where the situation becomes interesting. If the WOW signal came from the Three Eyes Atlas, how powerful must its source have been? The detected intensity ranged from 54 to 212 Janskis, with a bandwidth of about 10 kilohertz at a distance of 600 astronomical units. If we work backwards through the inverse square law, this corresponds to the power of a source ranging from 0.5 to 2 gigawatts. For comparison, this matches the output of a typical nuclear reactor on Earth. This is not beyond the technological capabilities of an advanced civilization, but it definitely indicates a deliberate transmission of high-level energy. The radio telescope that detected the signal was tuned to the hydrogen line frequency of 1420 megahertz, as hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. Any civilization capable of radio astronomy would know this. It is the cosmic frequency of greeting, the exact place to broadcast if you wanted to be found. And here we have an interstellar object moving at a speed of 58 kilometers per second, arriving exactly from the direction the signal came from 48 years ago. Skeptics will point out, and they will not be wrong, that Sagittarius is a vast region of the sky containing the galactic center and billions of stars, many potential sources. The chance of a match may simply be a coincidence. But skeptics also cannot explain why the Three Eyes of Atlas exhibit so many other anomalies that we will investigate during this inquiry. For example, the impossible ratio of mass to trajectory, alignment with our ecliptic plane, pure nickel emissions without iron. Each anomaly can be dismissed individually, but together they form a pattern that is harder to ignore. Also consider the temporal coincidence. 5 days after detecting the signal, NASA launched the Voyager 2 mission on August 20th, 1977. It was the most ambitious expedition to the outer planets and beyond. Currently, Voyager 2 continues its journey into interstellar space, carrying a golden record, our message for any intelligent life that might intercept it. Was the WOW signal a response to a previous radio transmission from Earth? Television broadcasts, radar signals, military communications. All of this has been transmitted into space since the 1940s. If so, the temporal connection seems logical. Signals traveling at the speed of light from Earth in the late 30s or early 40s would reach the location of the Three Eyes of Atlas around 1977, assuming it moved at a constant speed for billions of years. This raises another question. If the Three Eyes of Atlas really sent the signal, wow, why only once? Why 72 seconds and then silence? One possibility is that he did not broadcast continuously, but sent a pulse, a signal, a greeting, precisely synchronized with the moment when Earth entered his beam. The Large Ear Telescope had two receiving horns that observed the sky with a 3-minute difference. If the signal had been continuous, both horns should have detected it, but only one did. This suggests that the source was moving, which astronomical objects typically do not do over such short time intervals, or the transmission was brief and purposeful. VLOB calls for radio telescopes to monitor the three-eyed atlas as it continues its journey through our solar system. At the moment, no radio station has reported data on this object, and we are operating blindly in the electromagnetic spectrum, focusing on visible light and ultraviolet radiation, ignoring the very range where the original signal appeared. This seems like an attempt to solve a murder while consciously ignoring the weapon used. The urgency of the situation lies not only in academic interest. If the three-eyed atlas truly transmits signals, if it sent that astonishing signal, if it is capable of gigawatt broadcasts, then we are dealing with technology, not geology. And technology implies the presence of intelligence. Intelligence implies intention, and intention requires assessment. Loebi proposed a so-called LOE scale for ranking interstellar objects, where 0 means definitely natural origin, and 10 means definitely technological and inevitably threatening. At the moment, he assesses the three-eyed atlas at level 4, indicating a 40% probability that it is not of natural origin. This is not marginal speculation, but a quantitative assessment based on observed anomalies, with a 40% probability that we are dealing not with a comet, but with a spacecraft, and a 40% probability that the astonishing signal was not random noise, but an intentional transmission from an object passing through our cosmic neighborhood. The similarity of the clues makes this situation particularly convincing. We have a known unexplained radio signal and an anomalous interstellar object, both directed towards the same galactic side. Both are related to hydrogen frequency or hydrogen-related chemistry. Both events occurred during moments of expansion in human spaceflight. An astonishing signal was recorded in the era of Voyager, when we first seriously attempted to go beyond our solar system. The three-eyed atlas appears during a renewed interest in space exploration, private space flights, and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. So far, the official scientific response has been restrained. NASA describes the three-eyed atlas as a comet. Tom Statler, a leading NASA scientist on small bodies of the solar system, stated that it looks like a comet, behaves like a comet, and strongly resembles known comets, but this assessment was made early based on limited data. With the accumulation of observations showing the absence of a traditional tail, mass loss without trajectory change, and a chemical composition unlike known comets, confidence began to waver. Not publicly, institutions do not easily change their positions, but in the questions posed, in the time allocated for observations, in the quiet admissions that yes, this object is indeed unusual. The community of astronomy enthusiasts was more open. Telescopes around the world track the three-eyed atlas, capturing images and conducting spectroscopic analyses of its light. Some of these images, especially during the flyby past Mars in early October, showed structures that did not match comet models. Angular features, reflective surfaces, and periodic brightness changes, suggesting the rotation of a heterogeneous object. The government closure of NASA, which we will discuss in more detail later, resulted in critically important data from Martian orbital probes not being released promptly. When the information finally became available, it revealed an object that resembled not a dusty snow globe, but something with clear geometry. However, no one was monitoring the radio frequencies. A very large antenna array could have handled that. The Eresba Observatory could have done this before its closure. Many radio telescopes around the world have this capability, but telescope time is a scarce resource allocated months or years in advance. Redirecting resources to monitor an object that mainstream science insists is merely a comet requires justification that most researchers are not willing to risk their careers for. This is the same institutional inertia that delayed the recognition of the first interstellar object. Oumuamua indeed had anomalous characteristics. When the consensus formed and it became clear that he was strange enough for deeper study, he had already left our system, becoming too dim and distant for detailed observation. The difference with three-eye Atlas is that we still have time. At the moment, it is hidden behind the sun from our point of view, overshadowed by its brightness, but it will reappear in early December 2025. November and December provide ideal conditions for observations, both geometrically and because the recent perihelion passage should have increased its brightness, if it is a comet. It is then that we will know whether he will behave as expected or reveal something that requires reevaluation. At that moment, radio telescopes must be directed at him to check for any signals in the hydrogen line. If the whale's signal was a greeting from 3I Atlas in 1977, and if 3I Atlas is now in our solar system, then the time to respond to this greeting took 48 years, covering hundreds of light years at sublight speeds. An object launched from a star that is the source of the whale's signal would take thousands or millions of years to reach us, depending on the distance and speed. But if the 3I Atlas was already on its way, approaching and sending a signal as it crossed the mark of 600 astronomical units, then the geometry converges, the timelines align, and the correlation becomes a confirmation rather than a coincidence. Of course, this opens horrifying possibilities. If this was a warning shot or a reconnaissance signal, and this is what we are capable of demonstrating, then what will happen next? If this was a frequency signal for communication, an attempt to establish contact, then our silence in response, our unwillingness even to monitor the correct frequencies, conveys a message of our ignorance or indifference, neither of which inspires trust in a sight that may be on the brink of cosmic contact. And if this was neither a warning nor a greeting, but simply a navigational signal, an impulse for measuring distances or checking dangers, then we are not the target audience at all, but merely interference. Communication with Sagittarius is important for another reason. This area of the sky directed towards the galactic center is a region with the highest density of stars. More planets, statistically greater chances for the development of life and intelligence. Programs for searching extraterrestrial civilizations have long focused on such directions, understanding that any civilization in this sector has a greater chance of neighbors, communication technologies, and reasons to transmit signals. This is a cosmic version of Times Square, and from this crowd emerged the project Tri-Eye Atlas. What we see is potentially a way for the universe to test our attention. Are we paying attention, asking the right questions, ready to look beyond familiar explanations and tolerate the discomfort of not knowing? The VI signal was a test we failed. We did not follow it properly, did not develop sustainable monitoring strategies, did not treat it with the necessary urgency. 4 decades later, we have another chance, another anomaly from the same direction, another opportunity to either understand or ignore. Science fiction writer Arthur Clarke once said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, but he also claimed that the only way to know the limits of the possible is to take risks and venture into the realm of the impossible. 3AI Atlas, existing on the edge between the natural and the artificial, between stone and vessel, between a comet and a communication device, compels us to take this step. That signal, VI, this 79-second burst of radio waves, captured the attention of a whole generation of SETI researchers. Maybe the voice of an object we are now observing crossing our sky. Not a mystery from the past, but a message from the present. This is a question without an answer. But the first part of a conversation we did not suspect had already begun. The night sky has witnessed countless objects passing through our solar system for billions of years while the Earth revolved around the sun. Most of them remained unnoticed, invisible to eyes that had not yet evolved to look up and wonder what these points of light might mean. The 3AI's Atlas are different only in that we are here to see it, measure it, and ponder its significance. In 100 or 1,000 years, when humanity spreads beyond Earth, we will look back at this moment and see either the beginning of cosmic awareness or a missed opportunity, a warning we did not take seriously because comfort was easier than curiosity and ignoring was safer than exploring. I think of all the people throughout history who looked at the sky and wondered if those lights were just lights or if something from them responded. Ancient astronomers tracked the planets, calling them wanderers because they moved relative to the fixed stars, creating myths to explain what they could not yet measure. Medieval scholars preserved knowledge through the Dark Ages by copying manuscripts about the cosmos, while religious authorities claimed that the Earth was the center of everything, and doubts about this assertion were considered heresy. Renaissance revolutionaries, directing telescopes to the sky, discovered that planets are worlds, stars are suns, and the universe is vaster and stranger than mythology allowed. Each generation expanded the boundaries of the known, conquering territories that previous generations could not even imagine, and faced resistance from those bound to old beliefs. We are in the same situation now, on the brink of an expansion that makes previous changes seem insignificant. The transition from the geocentric model to the heliocentric one was just a change of address. The Earth is no longer at the center, but it is still our home. The transition from the solar system to the galaxy was a change in the scale of proximity, a realization that our sun is one of billions. The transition from galaxy to the universe of galaxies is a change in the scale of perception. Billions of galaxies, each containing billions of stars. The next shift, if it occurs, will be associated with a change in the status of isolation. We are not alone, we never were. The universe is full of intelligence and forms that we are just beginning to comprehend. And the three-eyed atlas may become our first confirmed encounter with this truth, or a training run before the encounter becomes undeniable. The data we studied, the testimonies we heard, the anomalies we tried to explain create an incomplete picture that causes discomfort in minds seeking certainty, clear answers, wanting the universe to be understandable and manageable. But incompleteness is honest. We do not fully know what a three-eyed atlas is, not yet. If hypotheses range from a natural comet with unusual but explainable properties to an artificial probe from a civilization millions of years ahead of us. Both extreme options are possible, as well as everything in between. What we do with this uncertainty reveals who we are, just as what the three-eyed atlas turns out to be defines what it is. I hope we choose curiosity over fear, exploration over denial, transparency over secrecy. I hope that December will bring clarity, whether it is confirmation of natural explanations allowing us to classify it as an interesting astronomical event, or confirmation of artificial origin forcing us to confront the consequences we have been trying to avoid. In any case, the question matters. The community formed around the three-eyed atlas, people from every country sharing observations, discussing interpretations, demanding better data, demonstrates what humanity can be when we focus on space rather than conflicts, when we look outward instead of directing weapons inward. Thank you for staying with me in this exploration, for bringing your attention and mind to questions that have no simple answers. If this exploration resonated with you, please support further deep investigations at the intersection of science and mystery. The universe is full of such themes waiting for minds ready to explore them without bias towards specific outcomes. As always, this material is intended solely for educational and entertainment purposes, presenting various perspectives on ambiguous data. Draw your own conclusions, verify claims independently, and maintain healthy skepticism towards those who assert they know for certain when there is uncertainty. The light here is diminishing as I finish this text, which is a metaphor for completion, focused on objects in the darkness. But darkness is not absence, but a multitude of things we have yet to learn to see, and each point of light is an invitation to look deeper, to ask smarter questions, and to accept that the universe is not obliged to provide us with explanations, but offers endless possibilities for discovery if we are willing to try. The three-eyed atlas, whatever it may be, has given us this opportunity, and whether we take it or miss it, we will find out very soon. Good night to you, wherever you are, and may your sky be clear when December comes, and the three-eyed atlas returns to view, carrying with it the truths or mysteries it holds, indifferent to our interpretations but subject to our observations. A guest and space that have become a mirror for our hopes and fears, curiosity and caution, readiness or lack thereof to the cosmos that has been here all this time, waiting for us to grow up enough to see it. At this moment, while you listen to these words, an object moving at a speed of 210,000 kilometers per hour is hiding behind our sun. In 24 hours, on October 29th, 2025, the three-eyed atlas will reach perihelion, its closest point to our star, and what happens next could rewrite everything known. Avi Loeb from Harvard has just increased the likelihood that this is not a natural phenomenon to 40%. Images of Mars that NASA will not publish during the break, coinciding with the WOW signal of 1977, which has only a 0.6% chance of being random, a mass of 33 billion tons that should not exist. Listen carefully, because in the next moment this interstellar guest will either shatter into pieces like every comet before it, or do something that confirms what some scientists have whispered but feared to say aloud. He can release probes, self-replicating probes, and trajectory calculations show that between November 21 and December 5th, one of them may reach Earth. Write in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is for you, and whether you think Three-Eyed Atlas will collapse tomorrow or reveal something greater. If you enjoy deep dives into cosmic mysteries, please like and share this on platforms. Thank you for always supporting us. Chapter 1. The Calm Before the Storm. Something unusual is happening with the three-eyed atlas, and the silence from our space agencies is deafening. While you and I wait for answers, this object 7 miles wide continues its journey through our inner solar system at a speed that makes our fastest rockets seem motionless. But what makes today special compared to every other day since its opening on July 1st is that tomorrow will bring the moment of truth, the perihelion passage, which will finally answer the question that has troubled astronomers. Is it a comet or something entirely different? The European Space Agency has just released images from a Mars orbiter taken on October 3rd. In these photos, there is something that caught the internet's attention: a blurry white dot. However, independent researchers who enhanced the images discovered an elongated, almost cylindrical shape that does not match any comet we have ever seen. The raw data from NASA's Perseverance rover tells an even stranger story. Astronomy enthusiasts began stacking these images 20 frames at a time and found what astrophotographer Semyon Shmuz describes as a faint spot, exactly where the comet Tri-I Atlas should have appeared in the Martian sky. But this spot has structure, a structure that may indicate this object is not just a ball of ice and stone. Consider the timing of events. The closure of the United States government coincided with the moment Tri-I Atlas made its closest approach to Mars. Official NASA channels fell silent. High-quality images from the high-rise camera of the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, capable of 30 kilometers per pixel resolution of this object, remain locked behind bureaucratic walls. Some call it coincidence, others whisper about information control, but the community of astronomy enthusiasts does not wait for permission to conduct their research. One of the YouTube users, known as Dobson's Power, managed to capture something amazing through a solar telescope, tracking Tri-I Atlas as it approached the sun. In his images, structural anomalies are visible, features that should not be present in a natural comet. For several hours, his video gathered hundreds of thousands of views, and debates erupted in the comments. Astronomers remain surprisingly silent, bound by institutional protocols and review processes that move at a glacial pace, while this object races through our solar system at 61 kilometers per second. The quick detection of hydroxyl was encouraging. It was a chemical trace of water that was supposed to confirm that Tri-I Atlas was releasing water like any normal comet, but it was anything but normal. The object was losing 40 kilograms of water per second, located almost 3 times farther from the sun than Earth, in a region of space where water ice should remain solid. Dennis Bodovitz from Auburn University called it a message from another planetary system, but even he couldn't explain why such water activity is observed at such an unacceptable distance. Let me paint you a picture of what we are dealing with. Imagine an object that could be 7 billion years old, older than our sun, older than our solar system, carrying chemical traces from a completely different stellar cradle. Modeling conducted by Matthew Hopkins and his team indicates an object called Tri-I Atlas, formed during the thick disk era of the Milky Way, a period of intense star formation that ended billions of years ago, long before the Earth appeared. This is not just a guest from another star system, but a messenger from another era of galactic history. The numbers tell a story that does not add up. Richard Clute, working with Avi Loeb and Peter Wirtz, published calculations showing that the mass of Three-Eyed Atlas is at least 33 billion tons, which is 3 to 5 orders of magnitude greater than the previous 2 interstellar visitors, Oumuamua and Borisota. Statistically, we should have discovered 100,000 objects the size of Oumuamua before finding something as massive as the Three-Eyed Atlas. And here it is, the third interstellar object we have ever confirmed, and it is a giant among cosmic wanderers. The trajectory adds another mystery. The Three-Eyed Atlas approaches our solar system on a retrograde orbit, moving in the opposite direction of all our planets. Its orbital tilt is 175 degrees, which means it is actually flying upside down and backward through our cosmic neighborhood. But here is where it gets strange. Despite this unusual approach angle, its trajectory aligns with our ecliptic within 5 degrees. The probability of this happening by chance is 0.2%. During its close encounters with Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, the combined probability drops to 0.005%. Tomorrow, when the Three-Eyed Atlas passes around the sun at a distance of 230 million kilometers, it will experience thermal loads not encountered in possibly millions of years. Solar radiation will transmit gigatons of energy to its surface. If this is a natural comet, we should see an impressive gas outburst, possibly even total destruction as the volatile ice sublimates explosively. The spacecraft JUICE will monitor the events, just like ground telescopes, when the object emerges from the blinding light of the sun in November. Chapter 2. Connection Wow. But what if the three-eye atlas does not break down? What if, as Avi Loeb suggests with a 30 to 40% probability, this object retains its structural integrity because it was designed for that purpose? The implications echo back in time and cause discomfort even among experienced astronomers. Because 48 years ago, an event occurred that may be connected to what we observe today. On August 15, 1977, Jerry Ammons sat at Ohio State University, analyzing data from the Big Ear radio telescope when he noticed something that made him write one word in red pen, which would echo through decades of scientific mystery. Wow. The signal lasted 72 seconds, came from the constellation Sagittarius, and was never detected again despite countless attempts. It became the most intriguing potential evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence ever recorded. So far, no one has been able to propose a plausible source for this signal. Enter the world of the three-eyed atlas and uncover the calculation that sends chills down your spine. Loeb traced the trajectory of the object back, considering gravitational influences and the absence of non-gravitational acceleration, which makes this object anomalously massive. On August 12, 1977, 3 days before the WOW signal was recorded, three eyes of the atlas were approximately 600 astronomical units from Earth. It took light 3 days to reach this distance. The direction of the three eyes of the atlas at that moment and the point of origin of the WOW signal differ by only 4 degrees in right ascension and 8 degrees in declination. The probability of such a coincidence occurring by chance is 0.6%. Now pay attention to the power requirements. For the three eyes of the atlas to transmit a WOW signal from a distance of 600 astronomical units, and for it to be detected by the Big Ear telescope with recorded intensity, the object would need a transmitter outputting between 500 and 2 gigawatts. This is equivalent to the power of a nuclear reactor, the very energy source you might expect from an interstellar station designed to operate for millions or even billions of years in the darkness between stars. Loeb notes that if the three eyes of the atlas operate on nuclear energy, this could explain several anomalies, including dust emission patterns that do not match the typical sublimation process of comets. The WOW signal itself contains signatures that have puzzled scientists for nearly 5 decades. He appeared at a frequency of 1,420 megahertz, remarkably close to the hydrogen line frequency, which scientists have long believed extraterrestrial civilizations might use for communication, as hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. The signal was narrowband, meaning it was focused on a specific frequency rather than spread across the spectrum, as is typical with natural phenomena. It showed a pattern of rise and fall, corresponding to how the Big Ear telescope scanned a distant light source. All of this indicated an artificial origin of the signal, but without a source. It remained a mystery. The green glow observed in enhanced images of the three eyes of Atlas adds another detail to this cosmic puzzle. Spectroscopic analysis shows that this is not the typical green color of diatomaceous carbon, which gives many comets their characteristic hue. Instead, it is dominated by nickel emissions without the accompanying iron that you would expect to see from natural cosmic objects. Some researchers noted that this spectral signature resembles industrial nickel alloys more than primary materials from the solar system. Is this evidence of artificial construction or simply an exotic composition from an alien stellar environment? Consider what we are potentially observing here. An object that was already ancient at the formation of our solar system, traveling through interstellar space for eons, possibly sending signals at calculated intervals. The duration of the WOW signal, lasting 72 seconds, may not be coincidental. It could represent a specific data packet, a beacon, or even a temporal signal intended to attract attention. The fact that we never discovered it again does not mean it stopped transmitting. It may mean that the object called Three Eyes Atlas was rotating and sending signals like a beam of light from a lighthouse that crossed Earth's position exactly once in our observation window. The technical consequences of this are mind-boggling. If the three eyes of Atlas transmitted signals intermittently for millions of years, it would require not only an energy source but also complex systems to maintain orientation, manage thermal cycles, and protect sensitive equipment from cosmic radiation. The obvious structural integrity of the object after billions of years in space indicates either remarkable natural preservation or strength created using technologies beyond our current capabilities. Analysis of archival data from the Arecibo Observatory revealed additional anomalies that may be related to the three eyes of Atlas. The WOW project, investigating decades of unexplained signals, detected several weak signals at similar frequencies to the original WOW signal, though none of them are strong. The time intervals and directions of these signals do not form an obvious pattern, but if the three eyes of Atlas maneuvered using gravitational associations from various stars over millions of years, the direction of the signals would seem random from Earth's perspective. The current behavior of the object lends weight to the hypothesis of signal transmission. Unlike typical comets that begin to emit gases when approaching the Sun, the three eyes of Atlas displayed unusual activity while still beyond Jupiter's orbit. The discovery of water by the Swift Observatory occurred at distances where sublimation should be impossible unless the object generated its own heat. A nuclear power source could explain this, as could active systems preparing to enter the solar system. The backward tail observed by the Hubble telescope, which is a front ejection of material, may be a discharge from propulsion systems rather than just an interaction with the solar wind. Radio astronomers around the world are hurrying to tune their antennas to the three eyes of Atlas as it approaches perihelion, but the noise from solar radio signals complicates detection. The optimal observation window will occur in November when the object emerges from solar conjunction. If the three-eyed Atlas sends a signal again, if it sends another WOW signal passing by our Sun, we will be ready. Allen's telescope, a very large array, and dozens of other radio stations coordinate their observation schedules. Even amateur radio astronomers with software for frequency determination join the search. Chapter 3. The Mothership Hypothesis. The most troubling possibility associated with the three eyes of Atlas is not what it is, but what it may do tomorrow. When the object reaches perihelion, hidden from Earth's view by the Sun's glare, it will be in the perfect position to execute a maneuver known in low circles as the reverse solar maneuver. This gravity sling technique can allow an object to shed speed and release smaller objects into bound orbits around our Sun. We will not see this process. We won't be able to stop it if we want to, and by the time the three AI Atlas probes appear behind the Sun in November, all the deployed drones will already be on their way. The mathematics of deploying probes from the retrograde mothership is elegant and terrifying, as three Atlas satellites move in the opposite direction compared to our planet's orbits. Any probes launched with speed vectors partially opposing the movement of the mothership will have significantly reduced speed relative to the Sun. They will be able to enter stable orbits within the inner solar system with minimal energy expenditure. The retrograde approach is not a flaw. It is the perfect strategy for simultaneously seeding multiple planetary systems. Consider the implications of self-replicating probes, a concept that three AI Atlas could demonstrate. Each probe should not be large, possibly no bigger than a smartphone, equipped with basic sensors, communication systems, and, most importantly, the ability to gather materials and create copies of itself. Lioba's last blog mentions that these probes can spread through our solar system like dandelion seeds. Each of them can generate countless others, and in just a few years, not centuries, they can establish an extensive network of observation throughout our cosmic neighborhood. The timing of potential probe launches coincides ominously with the positions of the planets. Mars has just passed 29 million kilometers from the three moons of Atlas on October 3rd. The closest approach to Earth will occur on December 19th, at a distance of 1.8 astronomical units. Jupiter will have its turn in March 2026. Each encounter represents an opportunity for deploying probes, while the gravitational wells of planets act as capture mechanisms. A retrograde orbit means these encounters happen faster than usual, giving any defensive response less time to react. What will these probes look like, considering the anomalous mass of the 3I Atlas? We are dealing with technologies that far exceed human capabilities. The mothership itself weighs 33 billion tons, indicating that its creators have access to energies and materials on a scale we can barely imagine. Any probes he launches will likely be just as advanced, possibly including technologies we can't even imagine. They may be invisible to our detection methods, acting in electromagnetic spectra that we do not control, or using invisibility technologies that make them indistinguishable from natural space debris. An anonymous European astronomer who published a message on a platform raised an even more exotic possibility. What if 3AI Atlas is not ordinary matter at all? The hypothesis of a dark matter bubble sounds like science fiction, but it may explain several anomalies, such as the enormous mass of an object without corresponding brightness, unusual light emissions, and how it seems to generate energy rather than just reflecting sunlight. Although most scientists dismiss this as speculation, it remains a fact that the object known as the Three Eyes of Atlas behaves differently from any natural object we have catalogued. Observations from Earth have revealed additional oddities that fuel the hypothesis of a mothership. The changes in the brightness of the object do not match the patterns we would expect from the rotating core of an unevenly formed comet. Instead, they show periodicities that may indicate artificial structures or active systems. Astronomers report brief flashes of light that do not correspond to typical comet activity. Are these reflections from solar panels, communication lasers, or the operation of orientation engines? Without more precise data, we can only speculate. The possibility of nuclear propulsion deserves serious attention. If the Three Eyes of Atlas carries a thermonuclear reactor, it would explain the sustained production of steam at unreachable distances from the sun, providing energy for transmitting the hypothetical WOW signal. This would allow for correcting the course that keeps the object on a suspiciously precise trajectory. But most importantly, it would provide the energy needed to launch and support a fleet of mini-probes. Releases dominated by nickel, lacking corresponding iron, may indicate reactor protection or combustion products rather than natural mineralogy. A global precedent exists for the concept of a mothership in our own space exploration plans. The Breakthrough Starshot project envisions sending thousands of tiny probes to the nearest star systems, each consisting of a few grams of sensors and transmitters propelled by solar sails. The Daedalus and Icarus studies examine the use of nuclear fusion-powered spacecraft to deploy multiple probes in target systems. What we theorize about the Three Eyes of Atlas is essentially what we could do if we had interstellar research technology. The difference is that someone might have possessed this technology millions of years ago. The aspect of self-replication completely alters the assessment of the threat. Traditional CT thinking assumed that contact with aliens would involve radio signals or solitary visiting spacecraft. But self-replicating probes change the equation. Even if just one probe successfully establishes itself in our solar system, it will be able to extract materials from asteroids to create copies. These copies create more copies. For decades, Earth may be surrounded by millions of alien observers, each gathering data, perhaps preparing for something we cannot predict. The silence from government agencies takes on a different character in this context. If NASA or ESA discovers evidence of a deployed probe, will they announce it immediately? Or could there have been closed briefings, crisis management meetings, attempts to avoid panic among the public, while simultaneously making decisions about possible responses? A convenient time for the suspension of the U.S. government creates ideal conditions for hiding information while decision-makers rush in closed offices. Perhaps we are not facing media blackout due to bureaucracy, but rather a deliberate quarantine of information while authorities assess an unprecedented situation. Chapter 4. Ancient Visitor. 7 billion years. Allow this number to be realized. When Tri-Eye Atlas began its journey, the universe was hardly more than half its current age. Our sun did not yet exist. The atoms that would later form Earth were still scattered in molecular clouds. This object traveled through the cosmic darkness long before our spiral arm of the Milky Way completed its formation. And now it is here, bearing in its ancient structure the secrets of a galactic history we can barely imagine. Determining the age is based on a multitude of data converging on this remarkable time period. Matthew Hopkins and his team analyzed the orbital characteristics of the object and tracked them through models of galactic evolution. The Three-Eye Atlas seems to originate from the dense disk population of the Milky Way, a structure formed during a period of intense star formation 9 to 13 billion years ago. Chemical signatures identified through spectroscopy confirm this, showing isotope ratios significantly different from the solar system norm. What happens to the object after 7 billion years of interstellar travel? Natural comets would be destroyed by cosmic rays, their volatile components gradually sublimating under the faint warmth of passing stars. The fact that Tri Atlas still contains water ice indicates activity, which may suggest either remarkable preservation or ongoing activity. If this is an artificial object, then we are dealing with engineering designed to outlast worlds, with systems that have functioned since multicellular life appeared on Earth, with technologies that have survived the birth and death of entire stellar generations. The mystery of preservation deepens when we consider the dangers of interstellar space. The 3I Atlas has passed through numerous shock fronts of supernovae over 7 billion years. It has encountered intense radiation fields near massive stars. Collisions with interstellar dust grains at relativistic speeds could polish any exposed surfaces. Yet he arrives structurally unscathed, functionally active, as if protected by something greater than mere luck. One hypothesis suggests that the Tri-I Atlas could have been in a dormant state for most of its journey, with its systems shut down to conserve energy and minimize degradation. Only as it approached our solar system would it begin reactivation. Its ancient mechanisms awakened to life after an era of silence. This may explain why the object exhibited unusual activity beyond Jupiter's orbit. It did not respond to solar heat, but instead, it awakened. The implications for astrobiology are significant. If 31 Atlas is a natural object, it may carry organic molecules from another star system, possibly even preserved microbiological forms of life in its icy matrix. Several scientists noted that such objects could serve as vectors of panspermia, facilitating the spread of life between star systems. But if he is of artificial origin, it would indicate that intelligence arose in our galaxy billions of years ago, long before the formation of Earth. Civilizations that were older than our planet. The Milky Way, 7 billion years ago, was a completely different galaxy than the one we see today. The rate of star formation was higher, supernova explosions occurred more frequently. Metallicity, meaning the content of elements heavier than hydrogen and helium, was lower. Any civilization that existed then would have faced different challenges and opportunities than we do today. They could have developed technologies adapted to a harsher and more vigorous environment. Technologies that might seem incredibly robust to us. Considering only navigation tasks, the galaxy has rotated more than 25 times over 7 billion years. Stars have moved, been born, and died. The cosmic landscape from which 31 Atlases departed no longer exists. Nevertheless, he arrived in our solar system with such precision that he encountered several planets. The coincidence seems less and less likely. This journey looks planned, its trajectory calculated to intercept our system at this moment in cosmic history. The origin from a thick disk structure raises intriguing questions about the creators of the object, if any exist. Stars in the thick disk structure are generally older, metal-poor, and move in more elliptical orbits around the galactic center. Any planets forming around these stars would have a different chemical composition than Earth. Life arising in such conditions could follow entirely different biochemical pathways based on silicon rather than carbon, with metabolisms fueled by radiation instead of chemical energy. Forms of intelligence that we might not even recognize as life. The retrograde orbit of 31 Atlas provides another clue to its ancient origin. In the early galaxy, stellar collisions were more common. Gravitational interactions could easily change the trajectory of an object. What seems anomalous to us, a retrograde orbit aligned with our ecliptic, may have been deliberately chosen billions of years ago based on calculations of where our solar system would be today. If builders existed, they needed to predict the movements of stars on a cosmic timeline with exceptional accuracy. The discovery of water ice becomes even more intriguing in this context. Water formed in the early stages of the universe, but the specific isotopic signatures in the emissions of 31 Atlas do not match the water of the solar system. The ratio of deuterium to hydrogen, the proportions of oxygen isotopes, all are slightly different. This water formed around another star under different conditions. It is alien water, carrying the chemical imprint of its birthplace through 7 billion years of space and time. Recent computer models suggest that the Atlas III could have passed closely by hundreds of star systems during its journey, with each encounter slightly altering its trajectory, a cosmic pinball game played over billions of years. If this object truly gathers data, it may contain records of countless alien worlds, measurements of planets we will never see, observations of civilizations that rose and fell before the Earth existed. 3i Atlas can become a library, an archive of galactic history encoded in ways we have yet to learn to decipher. Chapter 5. Revelation about Mars. October the 3rd, 2025 will be remembered as the day everything changed, or as the day we almost learned the truth. But it was hidden from us. When the Atlas III passed 29 million kilometers from Mars, humanity deployed 7 different spacecraft to observe this historic encounter. What they saw, or rather what they do not show us, ignited a storm of speculation that no official silence can contain. The European Space Agency released only one image from their orbital spacecraft ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. One after a week of observations using multiple instruments. The image shows what they describe as a blurry white dot against the darkness of space. However, an independent analysis of this single frame reveals details that ESA does not mention. Image enhancement methods show that the point is not round but elongated, structured with a central mass, and features that do not correspond to any cometary morphology in our databases. The situation with NASA is even stranger. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is equipped with a high-resolution camera, the most powerful telescope we have ever sent to another planet. He was supposed to capture 3 Atlas images with a resolution of 30 kilometers per pixel, enough to show surface features, structural details, and possibly even evidence of artificial construction. These images exist. They have been successfully transmitted to Earth, but remain sealed due to a government shutdown, inaccessible to the public, and even to most scientists. What we have comes from an unexpected source. Images from the Perseverance rover, which continue to upload automatically despite the shutdown, show something unusual. Simon Schmooze, an astrophotographer who first identified 3 Atlas craters in these images, has now processed hundreds of frames. The object appears in 12 different sets of images, each showing slight changes in position corresponding to its calculated trajectory, but the shape remains irregular, too long, too straight, too symmetrical for a natural object. The community of astronomy enthusiasts united to fill the information void. Using publicly available orbital data, they accurately calculated the direction in which the instruments of each Mars mission were aimed during the flyby. The Chinese orbital spacecraft Tianwen-1 was in an ideal position. The test spacecraft Hope from the United Arab Emirates had an optimal angle. Even the Indian mission studying Mars, which has been operating for many years past its planned duration, could gather valuable information. However, none of these agencies have published any images or statements about the 3i Atlas. This silence appears coordinated, intentional, and deafening. Meanwhile, leaked information began to surface on encrypted messengers and anonymous image boards. One of the users, claiming to be a contractor at JPL, posted what he said were raw, high-quality images before his account was deleted within a few hours. If these images are genuine, they depict an object that defies traditional explanation. It appears to be made up of separate sections, possibly modules, connected by a central frame. There are symmetrical projections that could be solar panels, radiators, or arrays of sensors. The image quality is too low to be sure, but the implications could be stunning. The published spectroscopic data raises more questions than it answers. Unusual absorption lines were discovered on Mars that do not match typical cometary emissions. The spectrometer on the ExoMars revealed traces of complex organic molecules, rather than simple chains you might expect from primordial ice. Instead, signatures indicating recycled materials, possibly even polymers, were found. The teams analyzing this data exhibit remarkable caution in their interpretations, using careful language that avoids certain conclusions. This is what makes the encounter with Mars particularly significant. The 3-eyed Atlas approached the red planet on a trajectory that seemed deliberately calculated for maximum observational opportunity. He crossed the orbital planes of several spacecraft, remaining visible to various instruments for several days. If you wanted to be noticed and studied, this is how you should approach it. However, if you wanted to gradually reveal yourself while controlling the flow of information, you would ensure that the most detailed observations occurred when the major space agencies were conveniently unable to communicate. Behavior anomalies during the approach to Mars added another layer to this mystery. The 3-eyed Atlas exhibited what seemed like course corrections, slight trajectory adjustments that kept it in the center of the observation windows of several spacecraft. These changes were subtle, barely noticeable, but they are present in the tracking data. Natural comets do not make course adjustments. They follow ballistic trajectories, altered only by gravitational forces and gas emissions. The Tri-Eye Atlas was doing something different. Private aerospace companies are noticeably absent from the discussion. SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others with deep space tracking capabilities remain completely silent about the Tri-Eye Atlas. Industry insiders report on closed meetings, non-disclosure agreements, and possible coordination with government agencies. The commercial space sector seems to know something the public does not and is unwilling to share this information. Social networks exploded with theories about what was actually seen on the missions to Mars. The hashtag #TruthAboutTri and Atlas has been trending worldwide for 3 days. Amateur researchers noticed suspicious activity on deep space communication objects, unusual movements of aircraft around aerospace contractors, emergency meetings of advisory councils of space agencies. This pattern indicates a coordinated response to information deemed too sensitive for immediate disclosure. The strangest report came from an amateur radio enthusiast in Australia who claims to have recorded encrypted transmissions from the side of Mars during its flyby. The signals used a frequency range reserved for deep space missions but did not match known spacecraft protocols. The operator recorded for several minutes before the transmission suddenly stopped. The analysis of the recording revealed structured data packets with mathematical regularities indicating artificial origin, but without encryption keys or context. The content remains a mystery. Chapter 6. The Chemical Mystery. Water flowing from Tri and Atlas should not exist, not at such a distance from the Sun, not at such a speed, not with these specific molecular characteristics. 40 kilograms per second, flowing into space like a fire hose at full pressure, while the object moves through areas where water ice should be as inert as stone. The detection of hydroxyl radicals by the Sweet Observatory was our first chemical fingerprint of this visitor, and what it reveals calls into question everything we thought about comet physics. When water molecules break down in space, they create hydroxyl radicals that glow in ultraviolet light. We have observed this process in many comets, but never like this. 3 and Atlas produced these signatures while being nearly 3 astronomical units from the Sun, in frozen depths where even carbon dioxide barely sublimates. The energy needed to produce this water must come from somewhere, and solar radiation is insufficient to explain it. The ratios of isotopes tell an even stranger story. The ratio of deuterium to hydrogen in the water of Tri and Atlas does not match any reservoir in our solar system, neither the oceans of Earth, nor the moons of Jupiter, nor the ice in other comets. This is alien water formed around another star under different conditions billions of years ago. But what truly puzzles is the ratios. They are too perfect, too consistent, as if the water had been processed, purified, standardized in a way that nature rarely achieves. The Zexi Xing team at Auburn University suggested that water could come from floating icy particles in the coma, rather than from the core itself. These particles, somehow detached from the main body, would supply more efficiently due to their high surface area. However, this explanation raises its own questions. How exactly did the particles separate from the core? Why do we not observe similar behavior in other comets at such distances? And why do the particles appear to be the same size, as if they were manufactured rather than randomly broken apart? The mystery of the nickel deepens with each new observation. Spectroscopic analysis shows strong emissions of nickel without the accompanying iron we would expect from natural differentiation. The ratio of nickel to iron differs by orders of magnitude. Some researchers quietly noted that this feature resembles certain industrial alloys more than the primary materials of the solar system. Nickel alloys designed for extreme conditions, alloys that can survive billions of years in space without corroding. The detection of carbon dioxide using SphereX added another piece to this puzzle. Carbon dioxide emissions show an unusual isotopic enrichment of carbon-11, a heavier variant that is relatively rare in our solar system. This sample of enrichment may result from biological processing, industrial purification, or formation in a stellar environment with a different history of nuclear synthesis. Each of these possibilities has profound implications for the nature of the three-eyed atlas. Consider the chemistry required to sustain water production in such volumes for weeks or months. If hydroxyl emissions are indeed occurring, and numerous independent observations confirm this, then the three-eyed atlas must contain either vast reservoirs of easily sublimable ice or an internal heat source sustaining this process. The hypothesis of a nuclear reactor suddenly seems less fantastic when you consider the necessary energy budget. organic molecules, discovered but not fully characterized, present another mystery. The teams analyzing the data were surprisingly restrained in their details, mentioning only complex chains and unexpected structures. The League's spectra suggest the presence of amino acids, but not simple ones like glycine, which we found in other comets. These seem to be more complex, possibly even exhibiting chirality, a molecular asymmetry characteristic of biological processes. Gas chromatography data from one of the Martian orbiters, briefly available on a public server before being deleted, showed peaks corresponding to long-chain hydrocarbons rather than the random mixture expected from primordial ice, with specific compounds at regular intervals in their mass spectrum, almost as if someone had conducted chemical experiments to create specific molecules for particular purposes. The composition of the dust adds another layer of mystery. Unlike typical comets that emit silicate dust similar to asteroids, the dust of the three-eyed Atlas shows unusual spectral features. There are absorption bands that do not match known minerals and emission lines indicating exotic materials. Some researchers have speculated in private conversations about man-made particles designed at the nanoscale, with properties we do not yet understand. Temperature measurements obtained through infrared observations also do not match the models. An object called the three-eyed Atlas appears warmer than it should be at its current distance from the Sun, suggesting an internal heat source with uneven temperature distribution across its surface. There are hotspots that remain in place during observations relative to the object's rotation. Natural comets do not have permanent hotspots, but machines with energy sources do. The chemical evolution of the three-eyed Atlas as it approaches the Sun will be indicative. Natural comets demonstrate predictable changes in their emissions as various evaporating substances reach sublimation temperatures. Water, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, methane. Each of these substances begins to actively evaporate at certain distances from the Sun. If the three-eyed Atlas follows this model, it will confirm the hypothesis of its natural origin. But if his abnormal behavior continues, if the chemistry remains inconsistent with thermal models, then we are dealing with something entirely different. Laboratory attempts to reproduce the spectral signatures of the three-eyed Atlas have repeatedly failed. No combination of known evaporating substances and minerals produces the exact emission patterns that we observe. Researchers have tried exotic mixtures, primitive compositions, and even simulated interstellar processing. Nothing fits perfectly, as if the three-eyed Atlas is made of materials that do not exist in our solar system, or at least not in the combinations we observe. The path that the three-eyed Atlas took through our solar system resembles a carefully planned route rather than a random series of events. Every calculation, every probability assessment, every statistical analysis points to one alarming conclusion. This trajectory is too perfect, too precisely aligned with the positions of the planets, too optimized for gravitational maneuvers to be natural. The odds are so slim that winning the lottery seems more likely. Let's start with the approach vector. The three-eyed Atlas entered our solar system on a retrograde orbit, tilted at 175 degrees, essentially flying upside down and backward relative to our planets. This was supposed to make encounters with the planets less likely, not more. Nevertheless, his path was charted through our solar system, like a needle through the cosmic fabric, passing close to Mars, approaching Venus, heading towards Jupiter, while maintaining alignment with Earth's orbital plane with a probability of only 0.012%. Richard Chloe's calculations revealed something even more troubling. The arrival time of the three-eyed Atlas synchronized with the positions of the planets in a way that goes beyond statistical explanation. Mars was in the perfect position for the flyby on October 3rd. The Earth will be in an ideal position for a meeting in December. Jupiter is waiting its turn in March. The cumulative probability of such alignments occurring naturally is only 0.5%. This is less likely than flipping a coin and getting heads 17 times in a row. Now consider the absence of gravitational acceleration. Despite the massive gas emissions, despite losing 40 kilograms of water per second, the three-eyed Atlas did not deviate from its calculated path by even a fraction, 0.028 thousandths of an angular second. This indicates such a massive object that the rocket effect of sublimating gases cannot influence it, or that there is active orbital support correcting any deviations. Both explanations challenge our understanding of what we are observing. The alignment along the ecliptic becomes even more suspicious when considering the geometry of the galaxy. Earth's orbital plane is tilted at an angle of 60 degrees to the galactic disk, from which most interstellar objects should originate. For the three-eyed atlas to align within 5 degrees of our ecliptic after a potential journey of billions of years, it requires either incredible luck or conscious navigation. Loeb calculated that objects from the galactic disk must come from random directions. The three-eyed atlas did not do this. Let's consider the lateral advantage. A spacecraft entering our solar system counterclockwise gains several tactical advantages. Collisions with planets occur at higher relative speeds, making interception a more complex task. Opposite motion facilitates the deployment of probes that need to slow down to enter planetary orbits. The approach angle provides a better observation geometry for the sequential study of several planets. This is exactly how you would plan a reconnaissance mission if you wanted to efficiently survey an entire system. The perihelion at a distance of 1 whole and 36/100ths astronomical units places the three-eyed atlas in the perfect position for a solar framing maneuver. Too close, and solar radiation could damage the sensitive equipment. Too far away, and gravitational assistance becomes less effective. This precise distance allows for maximum speed change with minimal thermal stress, ideal for both escaping the solar system and deploying objects within the inner system. The optimization is so perfect that it cannot be ignored. The trajectory analysis shows micro-corrections that shouldn't exist. Small changes in speed and direction occurred at certain moments along the path. These adjustments, barely noticeable in the tracking data, allowed the three-eyed atlas to remain centered in the observation windows and aligned with the upcoming planetary meetings. Natural forces cannot explain these corrections. The gas emissions are too random. Gravitational disturbances are well studied. Something else is happening. The future trajectory is of even greater interest. After exiting the solar junction in November, the three-eyed atlas will traverse a region of space that offers gravitational anchor points for reaching Earth, Venus, or Mercury. The window from November 21st to December 5th, defined by a low object, is not arbitrary. When the object's position relative to Earth creates optimal orbits for any launched probes, just a few meters per second of speed change at the right moment can send a mini-probe on a direct trajectory to Earth. Analyzing the reverse trajectory reveals another anomaly. The path taken by the object named Three-Eyed Atlas to reach our solar system apparently included close passes to at least 3 other star systems over the last million years, with each encounter providing gravitational maneuvers that adjusted its course. The cumulative effect of these meetings was supposed to randomly change his approach to our solar system. Instead, he arrived with surgical precision. This suggests either an incredible coincidence or deliberate navigation during an interstellar journey. The encounter with Jupiter in March 2026 opens the most intriguing possibilities. On the nearest approach, the three-eyed atlas will enter the range of the instruments of the space probe, Juno. But more importantly, the massive gravitational well of Jupiter may significantly alter the object's trajectory. Depending on the exact geometry of the approach, the three-eyed atlas may gain enough speed to completely leave the solar system or lose enough to become gravitationally bound to our sun. Which of these outcomes will occur may not be left to chance. Orbital mechanics conducted thousands of simulations, trying to find natural explanations for the path of the three-eyed atlas. They modeled various points of origin, different age parameters, and numerous encounter scenarios. None provided an observable trajectory with reasonable probability. The best models require the assumption that the three-eyed atlas originated from a specific point in space at a specific time with a specific speed, as if it were launched rather than naturally thrown. An information war is unfolding in the realm of astronomical observations, where data about the three-eyed atlas is being controlled, filtered, and possibly suppressed, creating a sense that the information is too sensitive for the public. The established patterns are too consistent among numerous agencies, countries, and institutions to be random. We witness either the most remarkable series of technical failures and bureaucratic delays in the history of space science, or a coordinated attempt to manage information about our interstellar visitor. The timeline of silence begins with the Chinese mission Tianwen-1. Despite being perfectly positioned to observe the three-eyed atlas during its flyby past Mars, the Chinese National Space Administration published nothing. Not a single image, no press release, not even confirming that attempts to observe were made. This is from the agency that usually celebrates every achievement of its Martian program with extensive media coverage. The silence is deafening and completely uncharacteristic. Russia's contribution to the X-Mars mission includes complex spectrometers designed to gather detailed data on composition. The Russian Academy of Sciences, usually eager to share scientific discoveries to enhance its prestige, published nothing. Individual researchers who had actively spoken about the three-eyed atlas in July and August suddenly fell silent. Their social media accounts are inactive, research pages are not updated, as if the entire Russian space scientific community unanimously decided that discussing this interstellar object is not worth it. The Japanese space agency JAXA, equipped with monitoring equipment on the International Space Station that could track the three-eyed atlas, also reported nothing. The Indian Space Research Organization, which still operates an orbital spacecraft around Mars, remains completely silent. Even the European Southern Observatory, equipped with powerful ground-based telescopes in Chile, shows unusual restraint regarding subsequent observations. This situation is observed in all major space powers and significant astronomical institutions. Private correspondences between researchers paint a troubling picture. Encrypted messages leaked to WikiLeaks indicate that preliminary data on the three-eyed atlas was so anomalous that several space agencies agreed to a voluntary embargo until further analysis was completed. The key phrase that is repeated is the necessity of verifying unusual claims. Sagan's standard, which states that unusual claims require unusual evidence, is used to justify unprecedented information control. Academic preprint servers tell their story. Since October 3rd, no articles have been published about the three-eyed atlas on Arxiv, the main repository for astronomical research. This is despite dozens of teams conducting observations, and statistical analysis shows that such silence under normal conditions is practically impossible. In comparison, the previous interstellar object Borisov generated more than 30 preprints in the first month of observations. The three-eyed atlas made no publications in the week following the meeting with Mars. Requests under the Freedom of Information Act submitted to NASA received unusual responses. Instead of the standard denial or partial disclosure, the agency invoked rarely used national security exceptions. The claim that observations of the comet could affect national security caused confusion and lawsuits. The Electronic Front Fund filed emergency petitions demanding transparency, asserting that the public has the right to know about potential contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. Meanwhile, the disinformation campaign intensified. Social networks began marking posts about the three-eyed atlas as potential misinformation, even if they merely cited published scientific articles. Search engines have changed their algorithms to lower the priority of content about the three-eyed atlas, promoting official NASA pages that haven't been updated since the encounter with Mars. The digital environment is shaped to minimize public awareness and discussion of our interstellar visitor. The community of astronomy enthusiasts has become the main source of current information, but it faces unprecedented difficulties. Several well-known amateur astronomers report equipment failures at critical moments. Telescopes tracking the comet three-eyed atlas mysteriously lost their calibration. Computer systems malfunctioned, destroying hours of precious observations. Although equipment failures occur, their mass concentration during observations of the three-eyed atlas is statistically unlikely. Government involvement goes beyond space agencies. The U.S. Space Force's activated surveillance tools usually meant for monitoring hostile satellites. The National Intelligence Agency reportedly repurposed satellites to observe the three-eyed atlas. The involvement of military and intelligence resources to study what is supposedly a natural comet raises obvious questions about what they know that we do not. International cooperation has taken strange forms. The UN Office for Outer Space Affairs convened an emergency meeting, closed to the press and the public. Participants were required to surrender electronic devices and sign unprecedented non-disclosure agreements. Small leaks of information suggest that protocols for potential contact scenarios and coordination of public messaging were discussed. Why does a natural comet require UN involvement in information management? Financial markets began to show unusual patterns correlating with the approach of the three-eyed atlas. Aerospace and defense contractors faced unexplained stock changes. Companies specializing in deep space communication equipment received large orders without disclosed sources. The derivatives market shows betting patterns corresponding to insider information about a significant announcement expected in November. Someone with significant financial resources is preparing to disclose information. The most alarming testimonies come from informants within the space agencies themselves. Anonymous sources describe fierce internal debates about public disclosure. Some advocate for complete transparency. Others insist that the public is not ready for what the three-eyed atlas might represent. The compromise position seems to involve gradually revealing information in controlled portions to prevent panic, while simultaneously preparing for the possible confirmation of unnatural origins. Tomorrow, in less than 24 hours, the three-eyed atlas will reach perihelion, the closest point to our sun. What happens at this moment, hidden from direct observation on Earth by the sun's glare, will determine whether we are dealing with a remarkable but natural comet, or something that radically changes our understanding of our place in the universe. The scene is set to justify traditional astronomy and confirm the impossible. Each comet that has ever approached our sun closely has shown dramatic changes. The thermal stress from solar radiation causes a violent release of gas. Ice sublimates explosively. Dust fountains erupt from the core. Sometimes fragments of entire structures can resist the forces of gravity and partial pressure. The Shoemaker-Levy 9 comet gave us a preview as it broke into 21 pieces before colliding with Jupiter. The comet's ice was completely destroyed during its solar passage. The sun is the killer of comets, and tomorrow the three-eyed Atlas comet will face a trial by fire. But what if it doesn't fall apart? What if, as Lobb suggests, with a 40% chance, the three-eyed Atlas retains its structural integrity because it was designed that way? The engineering required to remain intact in such a collision would be incredible. Materials capable of withstanding temperature fluctuations of hundreds of degrees. Structural frameworks that can handle thermal expansions without breaking. Systems that can continue to operate while being exposed to solar radiation, capable of destroying unprotected electronics in seconds. The spacecraft Juice will observe from a unique vantage point. His instruments will be aimed at the three-eyed Atlas as it passes by the sun. The position of the European probe is perfect for observing any fragmentation, any ejection of small objects, any behavior deviating from cometary norms. The data he collects tomorrow will either confirm the three-eyed Atlas as an unusual but natural comet or open a door we can never close. Observatories on Earth have prepared for this moment with unprecedented coordination. A very large telescope in Chile, the Keck Observatory in Hawaii, and the Gran Telescopio Canarias in Spain all planned observations for the moment the three-eyed Atlas would appear after the solar conjunction. Radio telescopes around the world will listen for any broadcasts, any signals that might coincide with the moment of perihelion. If the three-eyed Atlas is to reveal its true nature, tomorrow is the day. The deployment scenario describing the forehead seems like science fiction, but the physics here is quite justified. At perihelion, the three-eyed Atlas will move at a speed of 68 kilometers per second relative to the sun. By releasing probes with specific velocity vectors opposite to this movement, they can shed enough speed to enter elliptical orbits around the sun. These orbits can be calculated to intercept planetary targets over months or years. This is how we plan multitasking missions, executed from an interstellar platform. The ability to self-replicate transforms tomorrow from an astronomical event into a potential turning point for human civilization. If the three-eyed Atlas releases even one probe capable of self-replication using asteroid materials, our solar system could be colonized by alien technology within our lifetime. Each new generation of probes will be smaller, more numerous, and harder to detect. For decades, they may be everywhere, observing, recording, perhaps preparing for something we cannot predict. Note the strategic time of perihelion coinciding with solar conjunction. Ground telescopes cannot observe due to solar glare. Communication with missions to Mars is deteriorating due to solar interference. This is the perfect moment for covert operations, whether deploying probes or executing maneuvers that might otherwise be detected. If you are planning something you don't want to be noticed, now is the time to do it. The temperature of an object called the three-eyed Atlas at perihelion will exceed 400 Kelvin, enough to boil water, melt some metals, and trigger chemical reactions in any complex materials that may be present. For a natural comet, this heat causes impressive activity. For an artificial object, it may activate systems that remained dormant during the cold interstellar journey. Tomorrow's heating could be a waking signal, bringing ancient mechanisms back to life. Spectroscopic observations at perihelion will be key to identifying any unusual emissions. If the three-eyed Atlas is artificial, thermal stress may lead to the release of coolants, combustion products, or other industrial chemicals that are never found in natural comets. Several teams prepared specialized filters to detect specific wavelengths associated with recycled materials, synthetic compounds, and even potential communication lasers. The hypothesis about the nuclear reactor faces its greatest test tomorrow. If the three-eyed atlas contains an effective energy source or a fusion source, the thermal cycle at perihelion could cause noticeable changes in its emissions. Neutron detectors on various spacecraft have been activated, ready to detect any nuclear signatures. Although the inverse square law makes detection at such distances difficult, a powerful reactor can produce detectable signatures. Financial markets are already factoring in tomorrow's uncertainty. Options volatility has reached levels not seen since the pandemic. Aerospace stocks fluctuate on rumors and speculation. The VIX Fear Index indicates that traders expect significant market volatility after perihelion. Whether based on actual data or mere nervousness, money bets on the revelation awaiting us tomorrow. Military preparations intensified to the point that they could indicate planning for unprecedented scenarios. Skywatchers noted unusual activity at missile defense installations. Space Force assets were redistributed. The NATO Space Operations Center has entered a heightened state of readiness. Although officials claim this is routine training, it's hard to ignore the timing coinciding with the perihelion of the three-eyed atlas. After tomorrow's perihelion, the three-eyed atlas will disappear behind the sun from Earth's perspective, entering a blind zone that will last until early November. For 2 weeks, humanity will be unable to directly observe what may become the most significant event in our species' history. When he appears again, and our telescopes can track our interstellar visitor once more, we will know everything. Either the object will fragment like any natural comet experiencing solar heating, or it will remain intact, possibly accompanied by a fleet of deployed probes, simultaneously confirming our deepest fears and greatest hopes. The window in November, revealed from November 21st to December 5th, represents not just favorable conditions for observation. This is a time when orbital mechanics align for potential interception trajectories of Earth. Any probes launched at perihelion will require about 3 weeks to position themselves for approaching Earth. The timing is too perfect to be a coincidence. If the three-eyed atlas was designed for this mission, its creators calculated these windows with extraordinary precision billions of years ago. JUICE will provide our first observations after perihelion. Its instruments will capture the trinary atlas as it begins its journey to the outer planets. The position of the European spacecraft offers a unique perspective, allowing the detection of any structural changes, accompanying objects, and behavioral anomalies that may arise during the solar transit. Data transmission from JUICE will take time, but when it arrives, it will contain answers to questions humanity has asked since it first looked at the stars. Ground telescopes are already recording observation times for November, some entirely dedicated to monitoring the three-eyed atlas. The Vera Rubin Observatory, capable of quickly surveying large areas of the sky, will search for any deployed probes. The Event Horizon Telescope Network, known for its images of black holes, has been recalibrated for the potential resolution of structural details of the tri-eyed atlas. All major astronomical resources on Earth are preparing for the revelations of November. The radio astronomers community has developed special protocols for observations in November. If the three-eyed atlas transmitted a mysterious signal in 1977, it may transmit it again while leaving our solar system. Allen's telescope network will maintain continuous observation. The Breakthrough Listen program has allocated all available resources. Even radio enthusiasts around the world coordinate observation schedules. If the three-eyed atlas speaks, we will listen. The chemical evolution in the November window will be particularly illustrative. Natural comets demonstrate predictable changes in their emissions as they move away from the sun. Various substances become inactive in a sequence as temperatures decrease. If the three-eyed atlas follows this pattern, it will support the natural hypothesis. But if the emissions remain abnormal, if water production continues at impossible distances, if unusual chemical elements appear in the spectrum, then we are witnessing something completely different. The task of detecting probes presents a serious challenge. Objects released from the three-eyed atlas can be small, possibly the size of meteors or smaller. At astronomical distances, they will be almost invisible to optical telescopes. However, they may emit thermal signals detectable in the infrared range. They can reflect radio waves. They can even transmit signals. The search strategy includes many detection methods aimed at covering the widest possible range of objects that may already be heading towards us. Preparation of society for potential revelations in November began unnoticed. Government agencies updated continuity plans. Emergency broadcasting systems were tested with unusual frequency. Psychological support resources were quietly improved. Although officials claim these are just routine preparations, the moment raises suspicions of planning for unforeseen circumstances that could cause social upheaval. The Vatican Observatory, one of the oldest astronomical institutions, has scheduled a conference on the theological implications of extraterrestrial life for the end of November. They claim that the timing is coincidental. However, the guest list includes not only theologians but also astrobiologists, researchers of contact technologies, and importantly, several scientists involved in observations of the Three-Eyed Atlas program. The Catholic Church seems to be preparing for a possible confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence. International cooperation frameworks activated for the Three-Eyed Atlas program continue to expand. The Committee for Space Research formed working groups for various context scenarios. The International Astronomical Union prepared rules for naming any discovered artificial structures or deployed probes. Legal experts are developing frameworks for potential communication protocols. The infrastructure for first contact is being built in real time. Stock market algorithms have detected patterns indicating that large institutional investors are preparing for announcements in November. Derivative markets show unusual activity in aerospace defense and, surprisingly, in rare earth metal mining companies. Investors seem to be betting on technological breakthroughs that could transform entire industries. Regardless of the sources of information or deep analysis, capital flows to companies that can benefit from the potential disclosure of alien technologies. The psychological impact of the November window goes beyond official preparation. Mental health specialists report a rise in anxiety among patients aware of the Three-Eyed Atlas. Support groups have formed online for those struggling with existential questions. Some religious communities held special services. The mere possibility that November may bring confirmation of extraterrestrial intelligence is already affecting human consciousness worldwide. Scientific articles set for publication in November are piling up in journal review systems. Editors report an unprecedented number of applications related to the Three-Eyed Atlas program, many of which are marked for simultaneous release after certain observational stages. The scientific community seems to be preparing for a coordinated disclosure, with several independent teams ready to confirm or refute unusual claims. Cosmic consequences. Regardless of whether the Three-Eyed Atlas is a natural or artificial object, its existence forces us to confront a reality we have long refused to acknowledge. The discovery of a third interstellar object in just 8 years means that the galaxy is full of wanderers. Countless objects drifting between stars, each potentially carrying information, materials, or even intelligence from distant star systems. We are not alone, and never have been. The cosmic ocean is full of messages in bottles, and the Three-Eyed Atlas may be the first of them that we have learned to read. Its size and isolation radically change our understanding of interstellar life. Finding an object as massive as the Three-Eyed Atlas by just the third interstellar visitor suggests that there are likely many more large bodies in the galaxy than our models predicted. These are not just small fragments cast off during planetary formation. They are significant objects, possibly entire worlds, adrift due to stellar encounters or deliberate launches. The consequences for panspermia, the spread of life between star systems, are colossal. If the Three-Eyed Atlas is a natural object, it means that interstellar space preserves complex chemistry for billions of years. Discovered water, organic molecules, and unusual isotopic ratios suggest that materials from one star system can survive the journey to another almost unscathed. The building blocks of life can continuously flow between stars, seeding new planetary systems with complex molecules that trigger biochemistry. Perhaps Earth was fertilized by such ancient visitors. But if the Atlas is artificial, and the probability of 40% turns out to be true, then we are faced with a reality that surpasses any scientific discovery in human history. This would mean that intelligence emerged in our galaxy billions of years before the formation of Earth. Civilizations older than our sun, technologies that existed longer than our planet. We would not just be alone, but newcomers in a galaxy inhabited for most of cosmic time. The retrograde orbit takes on new meaning in this context. Natural explanations require incredible coincidences, while artificial explanations become strategic. Retrograde approaches allow for the reconnaissance of multiple planets with minimal energy expenditure, creating perfect geometries for deploying networks of probes. They make interception by primitive civilizations almost impossible with chemical rockets. If the three-eyed atlas was designed, its trajectory indicates a deep understanding of orbital mechanics and possibly knowledge of the configuration of our solar system obtained through previous reconnaissance missions. Consider the significance of the WOW signal. If the three-eyed atlas transmitted this signal in 1977, it means the object has been observing Earth for at least 48 years. It knew we had radio telescopes. It knew which frequencies we were tracking. Perhaps it even knew the significance of the hydrogen line for the search for extraterrestrial life. This is not a random message. It is a deliberate connection with an intelligence that understands us better than we might acknowledge. The scenario of self-reproduction makes us ponder the possibilities explored by science fiction, yet avoided by science. If the Triple Intelligence Atlas can deploy probes that extract materials from asteroids to create copies of itself, then we are dealing with technologies capable of colonizing entire star systems without biological crews. The galaxy may be full of such autonomous explorers, patient and persistent, spreading through space like a slowly developing explosion of intelligence. Earth could have been under observation by such probes for millions of years, and we did not know. 7 billion years of age alter our perception of galactic evolution. When the Triple Intelligence Atlas began its journey, the universe was experiencing a bloom of star formation. Supernovae were more frequent, and gamma bursts even more so. Any civilization that existed at that time faced problems we can hardly imagine. Nevertheless, they created something that survived, that functions, that can navigate. The required strength implies engineering principles we have yet to discover, material sciences we have not achieved, and possibly physics we do not yet understand. Our reaction to the Triple Intelligence Atlas speaks of humanity no less than the object speaks of the cosmos. Control of information, institutional panic, market volatility, all demonstrate our intuitive awareness of the significance of what is happening. It is not limited to a scientific discovery. It is a question of humanity's cosmic status. Are we unique, special, the only intelligence in the vast emptiness of the universe? Or are we one of many, perhaps being observed, potentially judged, and certainly can no longer pretend that we are alone? The philosophical implications touch all areas of human thought. Religion must deal with scriptures written with Earth's uniqueness in mind. Science must reconcile with the possibility that we are witnessing technologies beyond our understanding. States must consider sovereignty in a universe where Earth may be under the watch of soulless intelligence. Every assumption about the special status of humanity collapses if the Triple Intelligence Atlas turns out to be artificial. Even the economic consequences are astonishing. If the Triple Intelligence Atlas demonstrates technologies that we can turn to our advantage, entire industries will become obsolete overnight. Nuclear energy, interstellar engines, materials that can last billions of years. All this will revolutionize human civilization, but this also destabilizes every existing power. Countries with space programs will gain unprecedented advantages, and companies that decode alien technologies will wield power exceeding that of governments. The struggle for the secrets of Atlas's triple intelligence could provoke conflicts that make wars for resources seem trivial. The evolutionary perspective also reveals its revelations. If intelligence is so widespread that ancient civilizations could send probes that reach us today, then the universe is likely full of life at various stages of development. We are not unique. We are typical. Our struggles, achievements, and fates may be patterns repeating many times throughout cosmic history. The third interstellar object makes us see ourselves not as the pinnacle of evolution, but as one experiment among billions. Note that we are unique only in our perception. Chapter 11. Cosmic Consequences. Regardless of whether the third interstellar object is natural or artificial, its mere existence forces us to confront realities about our universe that we did not want to acknowledge. The discovery of a third interstellar object in just 8 years indicates that the galaxy is full of drifters, countless objects drifting between the stars, each potentially carrying information, materials, or perhaps even intelligence from distant star systems. We are not isolated. We never were. The cosmic ocean is full of messages in bottles, and the third interstellar object may become the first we learn to read. Its size and unique position revolutionize our understanding of interstellar populations. Finding an object with the mass of the third interstellar object, being only the third visitor from other star systems, suggests that there are many more large bodies in the galaxy than our models predicted. These are not just tiny fragments thrown out during planet formation, but significant objects, possibly whole worlds, ejected into space due to encounters with stars or deliberate launches. The implications for panspermia, the spread of life between star systems, are astonishing. If the third interstellar object is of natural origin, it indicates that interstellar space retains complex chemistry over billions of years. Discovered water, organic molecules, and unusual isotopic ratios mean that materials from one star system can survive the journey to another, remaining virtually unchanged. The building blocks of life can continuously move between stars, sowing nascent planetary systems with complex molecules that trigger biochemistry. The Earth could have been fertilized by such ancient visitors, but if the third interstellar object is artificial, and if the 40% probability proves correct, we will face a reality that overshadows any scientific discovery in human history. This would mean that intelligence arose in our galaxy billions of years before the formation of Earth. Civilizations older than our sun, technologies that functioned longer than our planet has existed. We are not just not alone. We are newcomers in a galaxy that has been inhabited for much of cosmic time. The retrograde orbit takes on new meaning in this context. A natural explanation requires incredible coincidences, while an artificial explanation makes the situation strategic. Retrograde approaches allow for the reconnaissance of many planets with minimal energy expenditure. They provide ideal geometries for deploying probe networks, making interception by primitive civilizations nearly impossible with chemical rockets. If there existed an object called 3I Atlas, its trajectory would indicate a deep understanding of orbital mechanics and possibly knowledge of our solar system's configuration gained from previous studies. One should consider the connection to the WOW signal. If the 3I Atlas transmitted this signal in 1977, it means the object has been watching Earth for at least 48 years. He knew about the existence of our radio telescopes, was aware of the frequencies we monitor, and perhaps even understood the significance of the hydrogen line in the search for extraterrestrial life. This is not a random contact, but a purposeful connection with an intelligence that understands us better than we would like to admit. The scenario of self-reproduction presents us with possibilities that science fiction has explored, but which science has shied away from. If the 3-eyed Atlas can deploy probes that extract materials from asteroids to create copies of itself, it means we are dealing with technology capable of colonizing entire star systems without biological crews. Perhaps the galaxy is full of such autonomous explorers, patient and persistent, spreading through space like a slowly unfolding explosion of intelligence. Earth may have been under the watch of such probes for millions of years without our knowledge. 7 billion years is a period that changes our perception of galactic evolution. When the 3-eyed Atlas began its journey, the universe was experiencing a peak in star formation. Supernovae were more common, gamma bursts occurred more frequently. Any civilization of that time faced challenges we can barely imagine, yet they created something that survived, that functions, that knows how to navigate. The required strength implies engineering principles we have yet to discover, materials we have not achieved, perhaps physics we do not yet understand. Our reaction to the 3-eyed Atlas speaks of humanity no less than the object speaks of the cosmos. Control of information, institutional panic, market fluctuations, all of this shows that we intuitively understand risks. It's not just about scientific discoveries, it's about humanity's cosmic status. Are we the unique, special, solitary intellect in the vast emptiness of the universe? Or are we just one of many, possibly being observed and potentially judged, and we can no longer pretend that we are alone? The philosophical implications of this encompass all spheres of human thought. Religion will have to reconsider its scriptures, which were written with the assumption of Earth's uniqueness. Science will have to reconcile with the possibility of technologies that surpass our understanding. States must consider the issue of sovereignty in a universe where Earth may be under the watch of cold and ruthless minds. Any assumption of humanity's special status will collapse if the 3-eyed Atlas turns out to be artificial. The economic consequences are mind-boggling. If the 3-eyed Atlas demonstrates technologies we could replicate, entire industries could become obsolete overnight. Nuclear fusion, interstellar engines, materials capable of withstanding billions of years. All this could radically change human civilization. However, Such achievements can also undermine all existing powers. Countries with space programs will gain unprecedented advantages, and companies that manage to decipher alien technologies will wield power exceeding that of governments. The struggle for the secrets of the three-eyed atlas could lead to conflicts that make wars for resources seem insignificant. The evolutionary perspective reveals its own revelations. If intelligent life forms are so widespread that ancient civilizations could send probes that reach us today, then perhaps the universe is teeming with life at various stages of development. We are not unique. We are typical. Our efforts, achievements, and destinies may be templates repeated countless times in cosmic history. The three-eyed atlas makes us see ourselves not as the pinnacle of evolution, but merely as one experiment among billions. We are unique only in our perception,